Hey everyone, welcome to GameFace, episode 219 on Sifted Games at sifted.net. I'm Shane Satterfield, the host of the show. You can find me on Twitter at Dinfire. I got two friends along with me for this episode. We got Matt Kyle waiting at home. What's going on, brother?
Not much. Been waiting for that announcement of the new Spiders game this morning.
Yeah. Has that happened actually yet?
Yeah.
Oh, it did. Oh, I missed it.
Well, it was like all done through like Central Europe time, so it was hard to calculate. But yeah, so it looks like it's called Steel Rise as opposed to Greed Fall. And it seems to be a clock punk take on the French Revolution.
Wait, what's clock punk, Matt? You lost me there.
You know, steampunk.
Yeah.
So it was a steam power technology punk, basically. This is
interesting.
so clock punk is clockwork, like steampunk, but clockwork. So there's a lot of there's a lot of like automatons and stuff, and the trailer is just all cinematic CG. Is kind of like panning across like CG models, like in like kind of a Les Mis like revolutionary pose, but like a bunch of them are like clockwork androids kind of thing, which should do wonders for solving their lip sync problem. But
well, you're right. Maybe that's why they're reverse engineering the game.
But obviously there's not. I mean, we won't talk about it today because there's nothing to talk about. It's just a teaser, cinematic, like concept art trailer, really. But I like everything those guys have done. I think Spiders, even when they're really unpolished and janky, they're interesting.
They're the slowest emerging studio I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, they're making the best BioWare games of the past generation. So.
Every game just gets a little bit better, just a little bit. Yeah,
a little bit. They better hope Dragon Age 4 isn't really great, because then they're going to be set back. They're finally gonna catch up to like Dragon Age Inquisition production value, and they're like, oh no, well, we got to do it again.
We also have Mitch Sikorsky, who's handling the TriCasting duties today. What's going on, Mitch? How's your week been?
Crazy, and it just with everything going on, it gets crazier every minute, every day. I swear. I think
that's the problem. Is if anything bad happens, it's just way worse, because there's all these other elements that you're having to deal with at the same time. It's just like a big snowball rolling downhill sometimes.
Yeah,
you gotta put the brakes on it sometimes. You gotta try to.
It's tenfold, and then on top of that, like I'm still trying to find employment, and that itself has just been a nightmare trying to figure out. So it's crazy. It's really
there's so many people looking for jobs right now, and there aren't a ton of jobs. So the competition is definitely going to be fierce. Having a college degree right now would probably be a huge help, is my guess.
Good thing I got that.
Exactly. It should be a huge help for you. So anyway, this is GameFace. This is our weekly podcast. We're here every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern here on twitch.tv/Sifted Games. Before we get on with the show proper, we got to talk about our poll of the week from last week. I'm not bringing up a graphic this time because it wasn't really an interest-based poll. It was more of a business-based poll for us. We just asked you guys what color combinations you guys wanted for our new shirts. And basically, without having to go through all the numbers, you guys want black shirts. That's the two options that were black shirts with whatever color print, they won far and away. And then white shirts with green print was like the runner-up. So anyway, thanks for taking the time to do that. It could potentially save us a lot of money, making sure that we make shirts that you guys want and that you're going to purchase. We do have a new poll of the week up for this week. It's live on Sifted right now. It's up in the header. And we're asking you about something that we're going to discuss in today's show. We're asking you about gamer toxicity. It's been a big issue over the last week, and we're going to discuss it a little later in the show, but that's our poll of the week, and we will actually discuss that one when we come back for the show next Tuesday. So anyway, it's time for GameFace, but before we do, we're going to hear a word from our sponsor. Ready to get away from it all without losing all the comforts of home? DeShazer Ryan Realty has a once-in-a-lifetime 200-acre estate for sale in Libby, Montana that gives new meaning to the phrase roughing it. This eye-popping main lake house on this sprawling estate has 4 bedrooms and bathrooms, phone, and internet. There are also separate guest and caretaker houses. It's the first time this property has ever been for sale, so don't let the chance to buy a slice of outdoor heaven pass by. It can be yours for $3.4 million. If you're interested, no matter where you live, contact Doug DeShazer at 406-291-1643 or deshazermt@gmail.com.
He can also connect you with local realtors who can help you with your specific needs. If you want to see more, head on over to www.snowshoeranchmt.com. That's snowshoeranchmt.com.
Man, for all the social distancing we need to do, that's the perfect place to do it at, right?
Dude, that house is insane. Insane. What you don't even see in that footage is that there are two other houses besides that big main house, all on like a private lake. It's crazy. I do want to say Doug DeShazer is an amazing dude. He is a really good guy. I've got to know him pretty well here on Sifted over the last few years, and he is just a really solid dude. So when you go to do business, if you're one of those people who likes to do business with good people and help out other good people, hook up Doug. He's good people, and he'll take care of you. He can also help you no matter where you're located. So if you're looking for property anywhere, he can refer you to a realtor there. So anyway, big thanks to DeShazer Around Realty for our sponsorship. We really appreciate it. And with that, it's time to get to GameFace 219. We're going to kick things off with what inadvertently became the biggest story of the week, and that is a gigantic leak for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Ubisoft strikes again. It's uncanny how often this publisher stuff gets leaked out early. It's just, especially Assassin's Creed, just time after time after time. And this week, a huge 30-minute chunk of raw gameplay was leaked to YouTube. Ubisoft took it all down. We're not going to be able to show it to you today. We wouldn't really even want to show it to you because the footage is really blurry. And that's something I want to discuss briefly. It's like, where in the heck did that footage come from? But anyway,
at least it wasn't a laptop on a plane this time.
Yeah,
I think if you have hundreds and hundreds of people working on something, it's kind of inevitable.
I'm also wondering too if some of the fallout of what's happened at Ubisoft over the last week, if one of those ex-disgruntled employees didn't decide to leak something out. I don't know.
It's possible, but it's not really directly comparable to what's being discussed. So I don't see why you'd risk legal action.
Some people just are vindictive.
Also, sadly. I'd say Ubisoft had a leak where literal presentation of Mario Rabbids got leaked, and that was like an entire PowerPoint presentation. So, I mean, they just have the wide gambit of leaks that I wouldn't be surprised on anything.
Yeah, I think Ubisoft's leak problem feels like just a consequence of extreme delegation.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
Because it just happens all the time. Like if this was the first time this had happened to an Assassin's Creed game, I might think more like it was related to the current outings of abusers and stuff. But right now, it just feels like just business as usual. Yeah. I do wonder where it came from. I mean, to me, that looks like, because I did watch it, and to me, it looks like the low res footage you'd use for a rough cut of something,
just to upload it quickly or whatever.
Yeah, and once you're approved, you put the 4K footage in and do the full res version. That's what that looks like to me. So my guess it came from a post house.
Yeah, some editor working on something. But that Matt, I don't know though, because the footage is really glitchy. So maybe it was his job to cut that stuff out.
Yeah, I think it's just a raw clip. I don't think we were supposed to see that whole thing in its entirety.
Yeah.
The
thing is that regardless of how blurry the footage is, you can absolutely pretty much learn everything about Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Especially if you've played Odyssey.
Yeah. If you watched it as I did and literally just took notes minute by minute, you'll be shocked at how much information was in that 30 minutes of footage.
It's clearly a vertical slice. I would imagine that's what you'd see if you saw the demo in the booth, if E3 had happened.
Yeah, that might be what it was, is a demo that they were working on to get polished up that they could possibly show at E3. That's
because apparently that was that demo is 4 or 5 months old.
You can tell for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's buggy for one, but to your point about it being a vertical slice, that absolutely makes sense because it literally shows everything in one mission. It's basically one 30-minute mission, and then after the mission they show leveling up, but it shows starting out and getting the mission, traveling by horse to the shore, getting in a boat, getting into boat combat, ramming the boat through a castle wall, storming the castle, killing the sub boss, killing the king of the castle, and finishing the mission, watching the cutscenes afterwards. So you get the whole gameplay loop from this clip, and there's just tons of detail. I found myself pausing, rewinding, replaying a ton because there was stuff that I was picking up on. And it was really hard for me to remember if all of it was in Odyssey or not. But Matt, I know that you're basically a scholar on Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So I'm very glad that you're here to talk about this stuff. So maybe the first thing we should talk about, we'll take it in chronological order in the way the demo happened, riding on horseback. That's not really anything new for the franchise. However, now there's this new cinematic camera that you can select while you ride that'll have like the camera like right next to the horse's head and your head as you're kind of bucking along.
And running people over because you can't see where you're going.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is it looks like the horse has this like ability to like bump other horses off the road. Like if you ride up alongside of them, you can kind of jump to the side and knock them out of the way and keep going. I don't remember either of those features being in Odyssey. Is that right?
Not to that degree. Like the primacy that your horse seems to have in this game is new.
Yes, it seems to be like an element of the game that's there all the time. Animals in general seem to be a big theme for this game. Because you fight the boss at the end of the demo, and the boss has a wolf, and you have to kill both the wolf and the boss. And if we've seen in trailers and screenshots for Valhalla, you eventually get pets yourself, like bears and things like that. And so I think that could end up being one of the defining elements, I guess, of Valhalla compared to other Creed games. At least it appears to be that way. But also there's other stuff too. As we keep going, we'll get to even more stuff. So you're riding and you get attacked by a pack of wolves. Again, like more wildlife, animal stuff just happening. He jumps off. He ends up killing all the wolves. There are finishers for animals. Was that in Odyssey? I don't remember that.
Not that I remember, but
Yes,
there are
finishers for animals. Like I don't remember doing any finishing moves on wolves.
Like crazy elaborate animations.
Yeah, I do. Especially if you were doing it against like a primal like panther. I remember doing one. Not against like just the basic animal, but if it was like a hunting mission for a specific animal, yes, I did see a finisher.
Yeah, well, these aren't named creatures, though. These are just regular
it's
trash
just one
animals.
of like 50 wolves, and the one's laying on the ground, and he jumps up in the air and comes down and like stabs. Yeah, she, right. Yeah, it was a she. They used a female character. So yeah, there's weird finishers for rank and file animals in the game, which I was like, what? That seems a little weird. Combat. What did you think of the combat that you saw, Matt?
I mean, it seems like a pretty natural evolution of Odyssey.
Yeah.
It's clearly the same. It's clearly Odyssey somewhat hosed down in Viking juice. It does seem to be taking some cues from like I see a lot of Witcher 3 in this footage.
Me too.
And I don't say that as a bad thing, obviously.
Of course not.
I do think the flashing rune stuff is going to annoy me after a while. Like a lot of hits and a lot of things like in the combat seem to flash up like neon runes, which must indicate like counters or like something about how you're fighting. And just watching it already, I got annoyed by and distracted by that.
I also noticed
I wasn't
that
a fan
there's one
there.
scene where he shoots or where the player shoots an enemy in the leg and his leg almost turns like it's on fire. Did you see that?
Yeah, I assume that was some kind of like property of the whatever arrow. It seemed like some kind of like, because I'm guessing like your abilities in this are like, you know, you're gonna have fire arrows or like poison arrows or maybe you're like things like that. And I assumed that was some property of the arrow that they were using.
Interesting.
Because you had stuff like that in Odyssey as well.
Yeah. You've had charged arrows in Creed for a long time. It just didn't look right, I guess is why it caught my eye.
Well, there's a lot of stuff in this that didn't quite look right. And I couldn't tell sometimes how much of that was just, you know, the low res of the footage and how much of it was like, oh, this isn't done. But it's hard to kind of say, because like obviously it's a pretty old build, it seemed like, and like they've got a lot more time left before it actually releases. But like, do I think that like kind of the slidey move when she gets on the horse is going to be fixed for the final game? Maybe not. Like a lot of it felt like this is just the level of jank we're going to have to deal with for this open world Assassin's Creed game that is coming out 2 years after the last one. You know, like
yeah. Did you notice that fire seemed like a theme as well? Like there was a couple points where enemies were set on fire, and there was a point where the playable character literally gets completely engulfed in flames.
Yeah, well, Viking Warfare did enjoy a lot of fire, and also, if naval combat's such a big component of this, like, you know, fire is the most dangerous thing for a boat, which is, you wouldn't necessarily think so because you're surrounded by water, but it's very hard to put a fire out on a boat. And so it wouldn't surprise me if that was a thing. Also, it's just sort of like there's a fire and flames element in like kind of Norse mythology and Norse stuff anyway. So it kind of makes sense. I imagine there'd be some, I mean, I don't think there'd be like ice magic or anything because like Assassin's Creed doesn't really roll that way except in like some of the DLC. But I could imagine there being like a big contrast between like fire and cold somehow, like or the ice in the sea or something like that. Like I would think that temperature extremes might just be a natural kind of theme that would evolve out of the use of the Viking setting.
Okay. And then other parts of the combat, most of it looks very similar to Odyssey, but with some tweaks. So the kind of, not the finishers, I can't remember what the formal word for them is, but like the kick moves where you kick them real quick or you use the shield to like bash them real fast. Like those were kind of hitchy and moves. Is that what they are?
I think they were counted as abilities, if I remember correct.
Yeah, at least in Odyssey, those would have been like the abilities that you'd have to trigger.
Yeah.
With a cooldown.
Yeah. So that's what I'm talking about. Well, they were kind of hitchy in Odyssey. They look way better here, way faster, way more fluid. It just the impact feels way more impactful, for lack of a better word.
Well, there's definitely a lot more weight behind them. I think that's natural given the Viking thing. You want everything to feel big and powerful. And I think they're getting that, and the sound effects as well. Like the hits are very chunky, I guess is how I'd put it, and they aren't quite that much in Odyssey.
Yeah, I mean, just watching the combat, it appears way more fluid than it was in Odyssey. That to me is a huge bonus. There's also it seems to be a lot more interaction with what the enemy has. So there's one scene where he takes the shield away from an enemy and then uses it to kill the enemy. There's a couple scenes throughout the footage just kind of speckled in there that show stuff like that. And I know that's nothing new for the franchise, but it just seems to be a little bit more fleshed out than before. But the parrying and stuff like that looks like it's taken straight out of Odyssey.
I don't think there's going to be a lot of surprises gameplay wise in terms of like the basic movement and combat.
Throwing weapons seems to be a huge focus of this. Like every weapon on the ground, if you watched, the icons just kept popping up, throw weapon, throw weapon, throw weapon. And then towards the end of the footage, the player starts getting into it. And it's pretty crazy because he's just like tossing stuff everywhere. And then the way the combat works is your abilities, I guess they are assigned to the 4 face buttons. And then both the L2 and the R2 are modifiers. So you actually have 3 levels of face buttons in the combat for this game. And there's one of those abilities where he throws like 2 axes like really hard, and it almost does pretty much just kill enemies. And then another thing I noticed, it appears that both the lead character and the enemies have stamina meters, which, as you know, I'm not a huge fan of, but just something that I noticed in the footage. It does look a little weird having those 2 bars above enemy heads, but I'd rather have the 2 bars and get that data than not get it at all. I'd rather have that.
I'm sure you can turn that off if you want to.
Probably. Yeah, you're probably right. Eagle vision seems to be a much bigger deal this time. I hardly ever use it when I play Assassin's Creed, except kind of when I need to. The player that's playing this was using it constantly, like over and over again. I don't know if that was at the behest of a developer saying, use Eagle vision, use Eagle vision. But I hardly ever use it when I play. But I
use it all the time to mark all the enemies out, but it's not, I don't use it for like just standard movement. Yeah, they were just like adventuring, looking around, and we're using it. So maybe that's a bigger element this time as well.
Well, in when you had they offered 2 options, and I remember in Odyssey where you could do adventure mode, I think it's called, where they didn't give you the waypoint and you had to use Eagle Vision constantly just to find the location. So that's maybe the possibility of what that was.
Yeah, I mean, there is a waypoint in this footage though, but maybe they're just using it for that.
So you guys are telling me everything.
You didn't watch it.
I surprised
missed it.
Well,
it's still up.
No, it got taken down.
Yeah, it's pretty much it's gone.
It's gone.
Kamatsu's running it.
I tried.
No, it's gone.
It's gone.
They went to Gamatsu and told him to take it down.
Yeah, so I tracked it. I tracked it down like I tried to the last couple days, and I couldn't find it.
I have it. Maybe I'll post it for our subscribers. Maybe. I don't know if I want to call from Ubi. I know Ubi really well, and chances are, if they did call me and told me to take it down, it wouldn't be a big deal. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. What else? Let's see. The castle siege. What did you think about that, Matt? So you bust through the main wall with the boat, which is pretty freaking awesome. And then you get there and you all spill out. And then you start using this like huge battering ram. And it becomes this thing where you're trying to use the battering ram to get through doors inside the castle grounds while you're fighting all the enemies that are around you, while you're getting set on fire. So it's this like multitasking thing where you're constantly going back to the battering ram to try to keep working on the door while you're getting attacked by enemies. And then there were multiple doors. I don't know if every castle's going to play out that way, but it was kind of a unique take, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't look to me quite as dramatic as like the storming of the castles in like Shadow of War.
Yeah.
Like it something about it just seemed to lack the scope of that. But like, it's an interesting idea. Like the idea that you have to like clear stages of getting through the various defenses of the castle makes sense. I'm sure there's more to it as you get to more complex castles later in the game. But I like the idea of kind of conquering the castle and like, like holding territory like that. And like, it probably gives you some kind of like, overarching sort of metagame advantage. I was interested in like when they showed the location, like the kind of the establishing shot of location, and you had like the stats of the region down in the corner, and it was like wealth, mysteries, and secrets. I'm like, all right, you got the open world junkie. Yeah, the open world junkie senses scanning, Viking scanning coming up.
I think I agree with you. I think that it is going to include stuff like that. Yeah.
So I think it looks like it's definitely going to have like a capture and hold territory thing, and that's going to factor into like how the rest of your clan or your Viking empire holds together. And like I like that a lot. I like the taking territory idea, and I like it was played with a bit in Odyssey, but like it wasn't really, there was no stakes to you because it was like the Spartans versus the Athenians, and it was really more like who you wanted in charge of each territory and like what you thought that would the advantages or disadvantages that would give you, or just getting like some loot when you like made a province change hands or whatever. But I like it better when you're taking over territory and it's having a concrete impact on your economic status or the abilities you can use or your allies you can call in or something like that. And it looks like that's probably part of this. So that's cool. Like, because I've been hoping they would recapture some of that aspect in the series since like Brotherhood, which is the last time I really felt like I was running like a functioning organization that was.
I love that part of Brotherhood.
Yeah, that was like the best part of it.
Yeah, it was so cool seeing your dudes just come out of the shadows and like do work for you. It's like I'll just sit this one out. Like I'll just let my minions come in and take care of it. I really enjoyed that.
And I feel like you're probably not going to get like, you're probably not going to be calling in Viking ninjas on this one, the way Brotherhood was. But I feel like there probably will be like a more team-oriented aspect to it just because of how Vikings fight. And I think that would be cool. Like I miss the Brotherhood aspect of the Assassin's Creed thing.
I agree.
The idea that they used to be an organization and now it's been kind of just like one guy running all over the place.
It's probably my favorite Assassin's Creed. I mean, I
think Brotherhood is the thing that finally realized the idea of the Bureau of Assassins.
Yep, absolutely.
And they never really came back to that for some reason. I mean, it's a lot of it is because, at least at first, they really were using different teams to make the game. Different teams and making things up as they went. And like
now it's more of a unified effort on that.
Yeah, but like Brotherhood felt like the game that they'd been trying to make since the first one.
Yep.
And then they just sort of spun off into Crazy Town after that.
Yep.
We'll see.
And then one other thing that lends to your assertion that this build is old is the voice work. I got so sick of hearing that same Viking cry over and over, and there's
a lot of stuff like that. Yeah. And like, there's also, I don't know if you noticed, there's not only is there a lot of like the same faces in the crowds, but
even though there's only like 12 dudes that join you,
they're definitely Greek. Yeah, like those are definitely Odyssey NPCs.
Like, it's so funny. You get off the boat to storm this castle and like 10 dudes run off the boat. I'm like, I don't know. I think we may need some backup on this.
The other thing is I'm pretty sure that we're looking at like current gen.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. That's not PS5 or Series X gameplay. No way. Definitely. You're definitely right on the money there. And then finally, we'll talk about like at the end, after the player finishes the mission, he goes and looks at all the progression stuff. So we get to see like the skill trees. The skill trees are set up like constellations. And almost like if you look at like the Big Dipper or the Little Dipper, how like the dots kind of connect to make a constration. Each one of those
like
is a different
like
upgrade.
The skill trees in Skyrim, the other Viking game.
Yep, that's true. It looks like there are 3 main paths for upgrades, and then within each one of those paths, there are multiple trees that you can go out.
It looks just like Odyssey.
Pretty much, yeah. That is one part of the game that looked like it lifted pretty much straight.
Like all the inventory and upgrade stuff looked pretty much identical to Odyssey, just with a different coat of paint.
Yeah, and they showed upgrades for melee attacks, ranged attacks, health, stealth abilities. So all the stuff you'd expect to be able to upgrade throughout the game is there. There are 8 total pieces of equipment that you equip. Again, I think that's the same thing that Odyssey has, and that's if you're not including your quiver for your arrows. So there's 8 pieces of armor and gear that you'll constantly be updating, something that really drove me bonkers in Odyssey after a while. The fact that each one was just this spec better than the one before. I was just always in the menus and just like, I don't feel any different using this weapon than I did from the last one.
Well, I eventually stopped doing, especially after having played Origins, like I just stuck with what I liked until I realized I was having problems. And then I would just switch to whatever the better thing was in my inventory. And that became even less of a concern in the DLC when I finished the game off later.
Dude, you were a god. I watched you play some of that DLC. Your character was a god.
But she was. Cassandra's a demigod.
That's right. But you know what I mean? Like, you were so OP, like just wiping people out.
Yeah, well, the level scaling is on. Nobody's more than 3 levels below me, but it's just you get these abilities that just can't be competed. I mean, that's kind of canon, really.
Yeah, it is.
But like it, eventually I just sort of like it became easier then because you could the later updates for the game added like much more robust ability to use the blacksmiths to upgrade whatever gear you wanted to stick with to be your current level, and then you could use the cosmetic thing they added to make it look like anything you'd picked up ever through the whole game. So like you could look at however you wanted, and you could still get the benefits of even the ugliest armor. If the ugliest armor set in the game had the stat bonuses you wanted, you could wear that and then still look like what you wanted to look like. So hopefully they keep that system in place on this, so you can kind of choose cosmetically what you look like without having to sacrifice utility.
Yep.
It looks like they do. Like it all looked the same to me, more or less.
So now that we've seen this, I guess I'll share my opinion first. I know a lot of people probably watched this and was like, oh, the footage looks terrible. It's all blurry. I didn't watch it for that because I knew it was just some ripped video and it was really had no bearing on the quality of the game. So I just looked at the features and the updates and the upgrades and things like that. And I have to say I'm a little disappointed in Valhalla. It's supposed to be a Viking game. The axe combat does kind of give it its own flavor. The throwing kind of gives it its own flavor. But it really feels like a big case of deja vu for me from Odyssey. What about you, Matt?
I mean, it does look very, very much like Odyssey, which I don't mind because I liked it. And like, the throwing stuff is, it's not really something I super associate with Vikings.
Yeah, I don't know where that's coming from.
I know where it's coming from. It's coming from God of War.
You think they're trying to incorporate the axe throwing from God?
Yeah, I think they thought that was a cool feature because it is.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of Norse stuff there, and like you might have sort of this assumption that people have sort of associated Kratos' style of combat with sort of a Norse flavor.
Yeah,
and it's something I do hope that in the final game there's a little more weight and a little more punch to the axe throwing, because I felt like there was a lot of. It felt very
nailed in God of War. Remember it's flap.
Like
the,
you don't God of War nailed it. I assume you're not going to be pulling the axe magically back into your hand.
No,
but it just felt like when the axe hit things in this, like it didn't chunk into them the way that like Kratos's does. That,
I mean, that's kind of an issue with Assassin's Creed in general, I would argue.
Yeah, it is. But like, I feel like if there's one game you're going to need, it certainly is an issue, I think, with Origins and Odyssey, with the new version of the game. I think
where combat is really kind of the crux. Yeah.
So I would, if there's one game, if there's one setting to really work on that chunky, satisfying hit combat with, it would be Vikings. So I'm hoping they'll get there in the final game. If a lot of this just feels really rough and not in a kind of like, oh, they're just going to release it this way, but like we probably weren't meant to see all of this.
Oh, we weren't meant to see probably any of it, to be honest.
This feels like something that was supposed to be peppered into like an interview segment or something.
Yeah, like a chunk of B-roll that they would give journalists to cut in with their interview or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. Mitch, what about you? I know you didn't get to watch the footage, but after Matt and I have discussed what's in it, what are your impressions?
I'm uninspired. I mean, as they go from game to game, I'm hoping for an evolution. And
you mean that God of War moment where they just flip the franchise like upside down?
Not necessarily. I think you can make like the example I would use would be like the Assassin's Creed 1, 2, 3 Brotherhood. I think those games are each different in their own way, but yet still keep the same flavor of Assassin's Creed. And yet these seem more like let's just polish this one thing here and then just change the setting. Let's just polish this one thing here and change the setting. And I think that's just not enough for because I didn't really enjoy Odyssey. I stopped. I couldn't keep going. The progression was taking too long. I was always under leveled. It was forcing me to do many side missions just to keep on level. And so I wasn't enjoying it. It was more bulky than I expected. And if the way you're describing everything in all the systems, my fear is that's what it's going to be again, and I'm not going to enjoy that as much. The only counter thing I thought about when you guys said throwing stuff, I thought Vikings are barbaric, and so they'll just pick up anything to kill the person because that's maybe the mentality they want to sell. So maybe that's why you can just pick up and chuck everything.
Well, the thing I would say to that is that historically that is not true.
Yeah,
so I would
I
would guess that Ubisoft is not.
Yeah, they're pretty on that stuff.
To lean on that too far.
Sure.
Like Ubisoft does seem to like to do like kind of like, oh, this is actually historic. This is what history really was like. Also, here's a Minotaur. But like it's kind of a mix of that now, which I like. I like them leaning into the weirdness because it's a simulation and you can do weird god mythology stuff. Why not? But they do seem to like, and this is more prevalent in the older games, but they do seem to kind of like to demystify the lies my teacher told me, sort of history misconceptions here and there. So, and then sometimes they make Charles Dickens hunt ghosts. So you never know.
Mitch, one thing I would say when you're talking about the first few games is that the first few games are the easiest games to make as far as making them different and adding new features because you start with this base and then you have so much room to build. What happens is as you keep releasing new games in the franchise, you reach the law of diminishing returns where you're working really hard to get just a very slight improvement. Even creatively, you reach the law of diminishing returns where no matter how smart or creative you are, it becomes harder and harder to come up with new ideas and new features when you have a game that already has so many features. And Assassin's Creed does. I mean, it's just a gigantic interlocking web of systems. So,
oh no, I get that. And it's
pretty typical for franchises to do that. But that's also why God of War is such a freaking revelation because Sony Santa Monica did manage to do it after a ton of entries in a franchise to completely kind of flip it upside down.
Yeah. Well, also the first 3 games in Assassin's Creed are all made by the same people.
Yeah,
which helps. Like because Assassin's Creed 1 was almost a prototype, and then Assassin's Creed 2 was much closer to what they wanted to do, and Brotherhood was pretty much supposed to be the last third of Assassin's Creed 2, but they didn't have time to do it. So it's all Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood are almost one game. That you can tell Brotherhood is a little bit more like where they wanted to fully take it. And then Revelation is where they started to farm it out to other teams to get one out every year. And that's where it really started to unravel, like you say, and where some teams would just ignore new features from the other games because they didn't like them or didn't want to work on them.
Bad there for
or they were like, new features would be added by one team but not picked up by the other team because they had to start their project sooner than the other team could implement the new feature and didn't know if it would work properly. Like there was the every year a new Assassin's Creed schedule was what really put that series on its back heels after a while, because like you could not keep up with the development of every different team, and so there was no sense of concrete forward progression, because every once in a while you'd hit this game where you're like, well, why doesn't this have this thing the last one had? And the answer is because they started working on it like 6 months after the other one started being worked on, and there's just no way to sync everything up like that. So
I totally get that, but I would just say I think they've done the flip with Origins to completely change the franchise, because like I've said in the past, I think it's not the same franchise no longer. But by doing that, I think what they've done with the last couple entries is what they've been very formulaic, which is what Ubisoft has been doing with their games, similar to Ghost Recon and Ghost Recon Breakpoint, Division 1, Division 2, very small adjustments and not making an actual leap to make it feel as if it's a real sequel. It's more like a 1.5. And
it's pretty rare that happens, though.
But I like them mixing it. I like mixing it up. It's just keeping it the same and changing a setting is not enough for me to
It is enough, though, I think, because Ubisoft's not going to change anything until something stops selling. And these games sell. The new format of Assassin's Creed so far has sold through the roof. I don't need them to reinvent the wheel every time. I need them to make their current idea gel better. And Odyssey did that. Odyssey had too much. Odyssey was bloated. I mean, it took me 180 hours to finish that game.
I think it took me 60 some, and I didn't do any of the extra stuff.
Well, that's including all the extra stuff for me.
Yeah.
But like,
oh yeah, of course,
it's a bit much. It ran out of tricks by the end of that. But like, I'll absolutely play. Whatever you throw at me for this game, I will play it. Like, no question. But I would much rather see them try to sort of like hone what came before and add in some things that enhance it, that make sense for the setting they've chosen. I don't think Norse, like Viking stuff, is particularly interesting. Like ancient Egypt and ancient Greece are more interesting settings to me than this. I would even probably have taken ancient Rome over this, even though it would have been very similar to Greece.
Yeah, I'm not all that enthused by Vikings for some reason. Like, people kept telling me I should watch that Viking TV show. I watched like half an episode and I just bounced right off of it. I don't know what it is. Like, it just doesn't interest me.
I just don't find it a particularly interesting setting or even period of history, really. It would have been much more interested in the feudal Japan idea that's been thrown around.
Probably will come someday.
Well, it's coming in about a week and a half.
Week and a half, yeah. Ghost of Tsushima.
Right.
But
that's the other question I have, is it will Ghost of Tsushima as another kind of historically grounded open world action game, like what's playing another Assassin's Creed Origins derived version of Assassin's Creed going to feel like after I've already played Ghost of Tsushima? Like that's one of my questions, is will Ghost of Tsushima
the bar
have
might
some
be
stuff
raised
in it that make me say like, oh, I want my like historical action open world action games to be more like this now, and as a result Assassin's Creed Valhalla might feel a little dated.
Well, there's an example for you. Ghost of Tsushima, you can play that game in Japanese subtitles in black and white, looking like old movies from back in that time. That's like small details that I think people appreciate more than just saying, go in this setting, there's this bulk thing, and you have this combat you can do. Like, those minute touches on a game, I think people appreciate them more than what people give them credit for.
I don't find that to be a very compelling example. Just because I love those old movies, but I am not playing this game in black and white.
I don't care about that stuff. I'm
excited to do that.
The Japanese language is cool, but like I don't expect them to dub Valhalla in Norse and like ancient Norse. Like I don't think that's useful to me, because there isn't an old style. There's no Kurosawa Viking movie to really like. Yeah, because like the Tsushima thing is referencing the old Kurosawa films and the kind of the Chambara like soap genre sort of thing. So they have something sort of culturally to pull from that. Like, I don't think there's an equivalent of that for most of what Assassin's Creed uses.
Well, that's kind of like half my point, is that they're not using an interesting enough setting to like pull some extra nuggets that would make people more interested in the setting. Besides,
no one's buying Tsushima because you can play it in black and white. Like, I think your point about
it's adding not the
more
seller,
adding more
it's
game
a nice
elements.
Extra thing that makes it enduring. And for me,
but I would rather have. I mean, me personally would rather have a gameplay tweak that I use through the whole freaking game in combat than some little flimsy filter that they throw over the graphics.
Yeah, I actually forgot entirely about those elements of Tsushima until you mentioned them, Mitch. Like, it's just not relevant
it's not
to my excitement over that game. It's more that what Tsushima is doing is trying to reinvent some of the wheel in terms of like presentation and how you follow things to get the quests, and kind of like, they're not just like gonna, and I'm happy that Valhalla does seem to be taking more cues from The Witcher 3, because The Witcher 3 is the gold standard of an open world action RPG for this generation. But I'm also happy that Tsushima is taking what Assassin's Creed and Witcher 3 have done and kind of saying, well, what can we do that sort of makes a 90-degree turn here? And I don't expect that from Ubisoft, because, as you say, they find the formula and they just roll with it until they get shot in the ass, right? Like,
until they lose money, basically.
Like Breakpoint. And they're gonna try to make Valhalla seem like a revolution but they just like they did with Breakpoint, and they sometimes they got Shane with that.
They did.
But and it turned out to be even worse than I thought it would be in terms of how skeptical I was about that. So I'm sure we'll get the oh my god, Valhalla's reinventing the wheel marketing push, but I don't see that as happening. But I also don't see it as impacting their bottom line in the end. But I do appreciate that sometimes Ubisoft will go out and break the mold, like they seem to be attempting to do with Watch Dogs Legion.
Yep.
But if Watch Dogs Legion is a hit, get ready for the next Assassin's Creed to be that.
Right.
It's like that's what they're going to do.
So I think someone in chat actually summed up the end of the discussion very well. Nox Eternitatis says, oh wait, he had another one. Oh, he put somebody in here. Now I can't find the one. Oh, here it is. If they truly wanted to reinvent, they'd take 5 to 7 years, not 3.5 years. Man, well, that's pretty right.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it takes 7 years to do that, but like
God of War was what, 5?
I don't think we know exactly when that started development.
3 years, because they had a second project in development. I watched the behind the scenes of making God of War, and I think it took about 3.5 years.
That was like hardcore, like actual development, though, right? That's not including the planning and.
Well, yeah, it was in the oven before that. About 7 months in, they were supposed to be working on it a little bit longer, but then that project got canceled, and they had to bring everybody in and say, "Oh, now we got to start this project." So it's gone through an unorthodox development cycle, but I think it was about 4 years total if you're looking at it from start to end.
That's impressive that they did that in that amount of time. But it's Sony Santa Monica, so I shouldn't be surprised, right?
Yeah, Sony Santa Monica is also the not the Ubisoft is short on, but they have resources like you wouldn't believe.
Oh yeah.
Also, they had a very clear vision on that, and they were able to reinvent because I think Origins felt fresh in that regard too. Just we'll see how God of War 3 feels.
Yep.
Like. How much can you tweak the throwing of the axe?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, now they're in the same boat as everybody else. They reinvented it. Now they have to see if they can keep pushing it forward at that same rate. It's very, very difficult. But you know what? I will absolutely take another God of War with everything the same and a new story. No problem. I'm all good.
And I'll take another Assassin's Creed. Like, even if it's just, even if after 30 hours I turn the sound off and listen to podcasts and run around and find mysteries and secrets. Like, I don't, that's part of the appeal to those kind of games to me. Like, just sort of like mindless
That's
exploration.
Why they're popular. There's something in them for pretty much everybody. If you like shooters, you can shoot. If you like stealth, you can stealth. It's a very wide palette, a wide net that it casts, and I think that's why it's the hit that it is. Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to stick with Ubisoft for the next topic, believe it or not. We're doing a Ubi block to kick off 219. We're going to talk about a game that was leaked, teased, announced, and launched in the span of 3 days. So it leaked. The reports were online where Ubisoft is about to announce its battle royale shooter, free to play, and we even knew the name. It's called Hyper Scape. And then Ubisoft the next day put up a teaser trailer. Then the day after that put up the main trailer and pretty much launched the game. They ended up launching the game basically on Twitch. The game has crazy Twitch tools built into it. So from the beginning, when Ubisoft was developing this game, they planned on it integrating with Twitch. And so as a proof of their concept, when they launched the game, if you wanted to get in on the beta, and I think it's still going on now, but pretty much anyone can get in if they want now. But if you wanted to get into the beta for the first couple of days, you had to go on Twitch and like watch somebody play it, and they would give you codes. And so proof of concept, check. That stuff works.
Shades of what's the Riot one? The Riot shooter that just came out.
Valorant.
Yeah, they did something similar with that.
Yeah,
right?
And I think it's the way of the future, especially if you're a free-to-play game and you just need as many people to play the game as possible. I just think that API is going to be something that's going to be in pretty much every one of those games going forward. It just makes sense, and I'm sure it's probably not that expensive to implement. It's probably something you can just license from some company for not that much money and get it into your game. So it is a free-to-play battle royale shooter for up to 100 players. This game, it has 3-man squads. I did not realize this when I first started playing. And like most battle royale games, it starts in the sky. There's no like, you know how in like PUBG, you start in the plane and you can see the other people in the plane, and then you watch them jump out and blah, blah, blah. This one just starts with all these pods just hurling towards the ground. And I didn't realize it was 3-man squads. And so I just flew off on my own and got killed like immediately in the first game. But it is 3-man squads. And there is an interesting revive and healing mechanic in this game. So when you die, you don't go to the gulag and you don't have to like just go and like try to get into the next game. You're actually still alive as a ghost. And as characters die in the world, these little portals pop up on the ground. And as the ghost, what you have to do is you have to get to one of those portals, and then one of your teammates has to come to that portal and revive you. And it, as far as I could tell, you can be the ghost for like ever. Like the problem is because of the system, you have to catch up with your teammates. And once you're dead, they don't care. So they're like running away from you, just playing the game. You're trying to catch up to them as the ghost because there's no point in going to a portal that's like 5 blocks away from them. They're never going to come and heal you. So it turns into this weird thing where you're like chasing your teammates down so you can get close enough to them where you find a portal that's close to them. So they're like, oh, that's only 50 yards away. I'll come and revive the guy. So I don't know how I feel about that system. It's a little weird because also once you're in one of those portals, so you get to a portal, you hold the button and you're stuck there in this like animation. While you're there, the enemies can come up and like basically defuse it. So there is a little bit of like a give and take in how the mechanics work. I'll just be completely honest. I've not played enough of the game at this point to know if it works out well over the long haul. I've played probably 15 matches of it, I guess, at this point, somewhere around there. So I don't know how that works out over the long haul, but it was interesting at least. I cannot remember another shooter that handles death that way. Health also is a little weird. It creates like an area where health kind of rises up from the ground. You have to stay in the area to actually regain your health. So there are some tweaks to the typical battle royale formula. And I'll say this. I like most of them. And what I like most of all about this game that makes it so much different from all the other ones is the verticality. So as you guys all know, as I've talked about ad nauseum, I'm a huge Tribes fan. That's a shooter where everyone has a jetpack. This game isn't quite that because you don't, in fact, have a jetpack. But it is very easy to stay airborne. Located throughout the world, there are jump pads. It's almost kind of like a throwback to Unreal Tournament. They're everywhere. But these jump pads just don't shoot you like across the map. They shoot you up, like way up, like to the top of a skyscraper up sometimes. They'll turn off gravity at certain points in the match, and you could literally hit one of those pads and fly all the way to the top of a skyscraper. And that verticality really changes everything as far as a battle royale game is concerned. Some for the good, some for the bad, to be perfectly honest with you, because the other wrinkle with this game is it's hard to figure out where the safe zones are going to be. I think they're random. There are like 8 or 9 districts in the map.
9 districts, and there
are 9?
Yes.
And they are random. Is that what you said?
They are random.
So I was right. And so you never know, like if you're in this one district, and like the one all the way across the map just disappeared, that doesn't matter. That one that you're in right now could disappear right then. And when it starts to disappear, it does some pretty cool stuff. The whole world kind of starts to disintegrate and flake apart. Like the polygons start and this whole game is set in like VR, by the way. It's basically Ready Player One, the battle royale shooter. But anyway, the world starts tearing asunder. Everything starts coming apart as it's basically a visual indicator of you're about to die. So the less of the world that there is, the closer you are to death, which I thought was a pretty cool feature as well. But it does keep you on your toes. But the flip side of this is that what I found was that the best thing to do is find a sniper rifle as soon as you can, and then just go to the top of a skyscraper. And I did that. Like I ended up partying up with a couple people, and we made top 10, like 3 matches in a row, just doing that. There was one time where the building that we went to, that was the first zone that was annexed, and then we had to move. But the other 2 times, we literally just stayed on top. The one time we finished second, and I never fired a bullet. We went up to the top of a building. I didn't even have a sniper rifle. All I had was a pistol. And they both had sniper rifles, and I just stood up there, and we got second place. So there are advantages and disadvantages of kind of the verticality. It's very easy to hide from people in this game because you can just go way up if you want to. And at the same time, there's all these buildings on the grounds that have intricate hallways and networks and doors. They do a really cool thing with the windows in the game. So kind of like The Last of Us Part 2. Windows are like a gameplay element. You have to break them, but they will sometimes have like a color on them. And that tells you, it gives you some information. Like basically what I learned was if you go into one of those yellow windows, chances are there's probably going to be a weapon in there. And the way the level design is built, every building, even the smaller buildings, have series of ledges on the side of them. And the reason that is because a lot of times you're coming from like 200 yards, 300 yards in the air, and you're coming down, and there's always some place to land. The rooftop areas also designed knowing that you're going to be parkouring across the rooftops. There's clear lanes that go through the tops of kind of the neighborhoods. And then there are also these rails that connect the big districts of the city. Of course, if you're on that rail, you're a sitting duck. Snipers are just going to shoot you. So I hardly ever went there. But there are ways to get around pretty quickly if you're brave enough to try to do it. There are 8 playable characters initially. The playable characters in this game are so forgettable. And it doesn't help either that they don't really have like any unique abilities or characteristics to kind of set them apart. This game does not have inventory. Again, a huge departure for Battle Royale. You never have like, I'm going to drop this weapon and pick this one up. You have basically 2 weapon slots and 2 hack slots. The way weapons work is you just pick them up. If you have a shotgun and you pick up another shotgun, it increases the power of the shotgun. So instead of weapon mods in this game where you'd attach something to your shotgun to make it better, if you just pick up another one, it will give your shotgun new functionality, which is also something that I thought was pretty cool. Like I'm not spending time just like standing still, looking through weapon menus or trying to figure out what mod to attach to my gun. It's run and gun. I mean, that's really what it is. The hacks are your special abilities. You can just pick those up off the ground. And they're typical Battle Royale stuff. There's a wall that you can put up. You can turn into a ball, which is kind of cool. It's a defensive technique because once you turn into the ball, you can bounce a lot higher and you're also like elastic. And so basically what you do is you use that to get away from enemies when you're overwhelmed. So there's a lot about the game that's very similar, but it also, as far as Battle Royale shooters go, it's one of the more innovative examples. And again, because I do like verticality in shooters and I am kind of a fan of that style of shooter, this might be one of my favorite Battle Royale games. Have either one of you guys had a chance to give it a go yet?
No.
No? What about you, Mitch?
No, but I saw a preview for it a while back and I'm really curious about it. I do like the verticality. I'm
surprised, Mitch, you're not on the hunt for any and all games to play on your new rig. Like when I build a new rig, I'll play the worst PC games for at least like a month and a half. I'll play everything because I just want to see how everything looks on my new rig. So I'm surprised you haven't fired it up already.
Well, sometimes I'm like, I had to get B-roll for my game flip this week. So that took up some of my gaming time and I have to do some other stuff in my spare time to find a job. So it's kind of been managing that time. If I had more time, I would have definitely already played this.
Yep. Also, so when it started, there were 3-man squads. And I should mention, eventually they did include a every man for himself mode, but there was a twist on that. And that was that the whole map was shrouded in maroon fog. And you may say, oh, that's silly. In a game about verticality, that's huge because you can't, if you're coming down from the air, you can't see the people on the ground. They're shrouded in the fog. So it takes away a good bit of the verticality out of the game. So if people aren't inclined to enjoy shooters like that, then there are options for them as well. No vehicles. So for some people who've been playing a lot of Warzone, that might be a step back for them. But I think people who want a more direct battle royale game, something that you don't have to think that much about while you're playing, but still has a good bit of depth. And really the depth is kind of in the traversal is what it comes down to. I think this is a good choice. I've bounced off pretty much every battle royale game. This is the one that I believe I've enjoyed the most, which I'm completely shocked by. But again, I'm very unique in what I like in my shooters compared to a lot of other players. I'm sure most people probably think Warzone is way better than this. But this game is free to play. And that angle of the game is not egregious. Like, they've never asked me to spend a penny on the game yet. And again, I haven't played a ton of matches. I'm sure it probably happens eventually. But for the break-in period, they are very kind. They're not bombarding you with, like, go buy this, buy our season pass, buy this hat, buy this gun. I didn't see any of that. It's basically like, here's this hub that you enter where you can launch everything. You can look at your inventory. You can launch a match from. And it's just very straightforward and easy to understand and jump right in and play. So I've had fun with it. Would I pay money for this game? No. I'm not a big battle royale guy. And another part about this is you do live after you die as the ghost. But a lot of times you die real fast, just like every other battle royale game. Like, literally, you come down in your pod, you land, you walk in the first building, and someone shoots you in the face with a shotgun. That part of battle royale is here, and I don't know how you ever avoid it. I think that's what some people like about it. But just to let you guys know, that is a part of that subgenre that is prevalent here. But again, it's free to play. It's PC only. It also, to Matt's point about Valorant, it scales very, very well. I tried a bunch of different resolutions to see how it was scaling. It does a really, really good job. And it runs like lightning pretty much no matter how it's scaled. It's just very intelligent in how it manages your GPU in general. So even if you have like a graphics card from like 5 or 6 years ago, you're still going to be able to play this and be competitive. And I think that's something that we're going to keep seeing going forward. These companies not wanting to squeeze anyone out of their ecosystem, especially with free to play, because every single person matters, because there's a very small percentage of those people that are going to actually spend money. So I was pleasantly surprised by this. So a little surprised that Ubi didn't wait till its show. I do wonder if the leak forced Ubi's hand and it hadn't planned on announcing this as early as it did. But at the same time, it is kind of a free-to-play battle royale game that maybe they wouldn't want in their big press event. But I have been very pleasantly surprised by this game. I've already uninstalled Valorant. I will not uninstall this game for a while. And I need something to play right now anyway. So I'm probably going to keep going. You. Sure.
When you're the ghost, could you use that as do you still have chat with your teammates? So could you use that to an advantage to be like a spotter and like sneak ahead?
I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, you absolutely can. So just like in a lot of battle royale shooters, there's a ping system in this game. So you can alert your teammates to weapons, to enemies, or just anything that you want to get their attention. And the system works in this, and it also works while you are the ghost. And it's pretty cheap because they can't see you. Like, the other team can't see you when you're a ghost. I mean, you're invisible. But you can see them and you can mark them. So you can absolutely become a functional part of the team as the ghost. I have a feeling that's something that either gets eliminated eventually or really nerfed, because it just seems absurd, in all honesty. Even with 3-man squads, it seems absurd. So yeah, that is something that you can do as a ghost. You can go ahead and start tagging, pinging stuff to alert your teammates. And I also found that was a good way to remind them that you're still alive, because sometimes it's like you die and they just go and they're like 2 miles ahead and you're waiting for the whole dying animation to happen and all the reincarnation and all that crap. By the time you're ready to go again, they're like long gone. And so I found that like as you ping stuff, they get alerts and they're like, oh, he's still alive. And sometimes they'll start working their way back towards you a little bit. So
can you not chat with them when you're the ghost?
I never chatted, didn't even try chat. So I don't know.
The only other thing, you played it on a PC, but it is available for all major platforms now, or is it only available for PC now?
I did not know it was available for other platforms now. I thought it was just PC.
It's listed as PC, PS4, and Xbox One.
Yeah, I mean, but that doesn't mean that they're all available right now, though.
That was my question. Is it available for all major platforms?
I don't think so. I think it's just PC right now. And the game is still in beta, I should also add. It's not...
okay. Then it definitely is probably just PC.
Yeah, it's not beta. Officially released yet. But here's the thing, people. You can sign up for it. Just go to Ubisoft's site. They're accepting everyone. In fact, when they sent me a code for it, I had asked for multiple codes because I wanted to get Mitch and Vincent and some other people into the beta. And they told me, they're like, you don't need another code. Here's yours. But everybody can just go sign up. We're accepting everyone immediately. So there you go. Inside information from Ubisoft. They're accepting everyone. So if you want to go sign up, probably within 20 minutes, you'll get your code. You can download it. Now, the downside of that is you have to go through Uplay. I have not played a game through Uplay like ever. It was the first time I had ever done it. It does work pretty well. It was interesting, though. I had like 60 friend requests waiting for me. Like, I don't know how people knew who I was because my name on Uplay is SLG Shane. And maybe there's some kind of a thing where they're like, hey, here's your Facebook friend or something. I don't know. But I had all these friend requests waiting. So I already have a big gaggle of friends on Uplay. But I am starting to realize now on my bottom tray, I have the Xbox app. I have the Epic Game Store app. I have Steam. I have Riot's launcher. I have Uplay. This is getting out of hand. Like, that's all. I just looked at my bottom tray and just listed the things that are all there. Just these programs, apps for gaming. Someone needs to unify that crap, if you ask me. But anyway, I had a lot of fun with this game. And again, I like the verticality. Another cool thing is, like, you can really bring death from above in this game because there's this, like, crazy slam that you can do. And you can do it from, like, the top of a freaking skyscraper and just reach down on them. So there are parts of this that make it feel different from any other Battle Royale game. So if you're like me and you've kind of bounced off of PUBG or Warzone or Fortnite, this is something different. And maybe this is something that will strike your fancy this time. So it doesn't cost anything. Sometimes it is a pain in the ass to just download stuff. This is only like 7 gigs, I think the download was. So it's a small client, very low risk, very potentially a pretty high reward. So I highly recommend if you got a rig. And it really doesn't matter how powerful it is either because it scales really well. But if you got a decent PC rig, give it a go. I don't think you'll regret it. All right. It's time to move on. We're going to move away from Ubisoft finally. We're doing them a big service today, apparently. And we're going to talk about the Xbox Series X first party event. We finally started getting some details on this. It was kind of one of these things that everybody had just assumed was going to be in late summer, and then Microsoft said, okay, it's going to be in July, and then we didn't have a date in July, but they finally announced it's going to be July 23rd at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Actually, I'm going to look on the calendar really quickly, and that is a Thursday. Yep. So Thursday, the 23rd at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern is when the big event goes down. There's some information leaking out right now, and then some of that information has already been corrected. But the big one that's floating around right now is that Microsoft's new studio called The Initiative, which you guys may have completely forgotten about because Microsoft established it like 2 years ago. It's actually here in LA. The big rumor is that new studio that's now been in operation for about 18 months, roughly, that studio is making a new Perfect Dark game. The initial rumors were that Perfect Dark was going to be shown for the first time, which to me, I was like, if it's coming from The Initiative, that sounds a little too soon, unless it's some kind of a CG, like this is what the game's like piece. But Jeff
Microsoft is not above doing that. I mean,
you're right.
I was just reminded today that there's a Battletoads game coming.
What happened to freaking Battletoads? I mean, do you think it's canceled now or something?
No, I don't.
I guess we'll find out on the 23rd.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, it didn't look like something that you would need to cancel.
No. I mean, it's like an indie game with Battletoads, basically. But it's taken them a long, long time to get that done. But anyway, Jeff Grubb from VentureBeat, who has now become like the replacement for Jason Schreier if you don't want to spend money on a subscription to Bloomberg, he is reporting that Perfect Dark will not be there. He said he has been unable to confirm or deny if the initiative is working on Perfect Dark, but he does know that whatever game they're working on is too early and Microsoft doesn't want to show it yet. So it sounds like there might be a new Perfect Dark in development, but we're probably not going to see it on the 23rd. We just talked about Perfect Dark, like 4 episodes ago, something like that, for its big anniversary.
Much the consternation of YouTube.
Yes, we got lit up for that one.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were like, this game is not aged well, but I think a lot of people are just remembering what it was like when it came out. And I think Matt and I would both agree, sure, when it came out, it was pretty dang good, but it is not aged especially well over time.
I guess it's better if you play it on like the rare replay version, because it's smoother.
What about a sequel, Matt, from a brand new studio? Does that sound like a winning combination to you?
I mean, a Perfect Dark sequel does not really grab my attention to begin with.
Do you think other people, though, it will?
I feel like a lot of people outside of the core demographic, like the type of people who would watch us on YouTube, I feel like most people don't know that Perfect Dark is even a thing.
Yeah.
It didn't make much of a cultural splash. It was certainly no GoldenEye in terms of mind share, and the Perfect Dark Zero was a dud. So you're talking about a game that has basically been off the radar for 22 years.
Yeah.
It's hard
to imagine anyone
not ideal.
Like us. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, Matt. Like for me as a younger person, this has no appeal to me. The brand itself has no meaning to me.
You were 4 when it came out, Mitch?
Probably. I mean, I played GoldenEye when I was a kid. Like that was probably the only thing from them. And then I didn't even know about Perfect Dark. I knew Perfect Dark Zero, but my brother had the game. And
well, you were a little older then. That came out for Xbox 360.
Yeah, but I preferred Cameo. It was better.
I'd agree. Definitely, I'd agree.
Yeah, I feel like you need like a Tomb Raider level reinvention of this thing to make a new Perfect Dark worthwhile.
I mean, the character was never that interesting. Let's just be honest.
No.
She's just a female secret agent. She never had witty lines. Like the funniest character in the whole franchise was an alien.
Yeah.
Who was like the stereotypical alien. What was his name?
Elvis.
That's right. Yeah.
And it obviously this is even more niche, but like Joanna Dark is just nothing compared to Kate Archer from No One Lives Forever, like which are more or less contemporary games.
Yep.
And that part of that was just sort of like No One Lives Forever. You're pretty much most of the time until the PS2 anyway stuck because it was PC only. But Perfect Dark was N64 only, so it's not like it's a huge multi-platform hit or anything. I just feel like you need to really figure out a new angle on this thing, because like Perfect Dark comes out. It did come out of the GoldenEye world in terms of gameplay, but in terms of presentation and tone and story, it came out of kind of the Mission Impossible / X-Files world, and like it was a very 90s idea when it really got down to it. And I feel like you need to have a new idea for that whole thing. I don't know if the secret agent discovers aliens thing is as salient as it once was.
Well, and I think that's also Microsoft's problem right now. They're trying to push franchises that people don't care about anymore, and this is why Sony's been so successful, is because they've reinvented many franchises or brought in new franchises that people care about. And I think that's what people want from Microsoft right now, is give me something new. Don't take something that you've done before or a franchise that exists before. Give me something new. Give me something different.
Well, I think you're more right at the beginning of that than the end, because God of War and games like that show that like you give me something new if you reinvent an old thing.
Correct.
And Microsoft just does, but like early on in that sentence, you were basically saying that Microsoft just doesn't do that, and that's very true. Like they don't reinvent things; they just sort of make it again. And like for me, if you forced me to make a Perfect Dark game against my will, like what I would do is I would basically reinvent it as Control. Like I would make something that's more of a third-person action shooter that had elements of kind of like the new Tomb Raiders and elements of control in terms of tone and sort of the approach to the unknown and the conspiracy idea. Less sort of less tongue in cheek and more like creepy, and also like kind of more of an open thing. Like I like Tomb Raider's sort of concrete groundedness in terms of how the character feels to move around and climb on things. And I think I would turn Perfect Dark into something more like that. I would not try to just make another first-person shooter,
another sci-fi X-Files style shooter. Like, I mean, that's really what it was. That era was like all about the X-Files.
Yeah,
that's
and you
really
just have
you get from it.
And Microsoft, kind of tangential to Mitch's point, like Microsoft has the shooter thing locked down. They got Halo and they got Gears. Like, you don't need any more of that. Yeah. Like, if you want to do Perfect Dark, make it something unique, make it something special. And maybe that, maybe the initiative, maybe new eyes from this new team is exactly what they're doing. Maybe that's exactly what's needed. But until we see what this is, Perfect Dark doesn't make me go, ooh, it just makes me go, oh, okay. It's just like, all right, sure. I know that name. Yeah. I know these words. It's like,
and then one of the other tidbits is that Microsoft literally just in the last 4 days renewed the Fable trademark with intent to use. Mm-hmm. Now in the same report,
which really does, when you phrase it like that, it sounds like a threat.
Yeah, well, a threat I'm very happy accepting for sure. Now, Jeff Grubb also touched on that in his article. He said that he knows nothing, that he has no clue, which probably is good. That to me, that's a positive sign.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been pretty sure for a long, long time that whatever the action RPG, the other half of Playground Games is working on is Fable.
It'd be pretty stupid for it not to be.
It would be, pretty unusual. Because I feel like this, if Perfect Dark really is in the works at the initiative, I feel like it's along the same lines of the Fable thing, where it's like we're just going to take the stuff we have and reinvent it for a new generation.
And that is one IP that could be reinvented.
Oh yeah,
and absolutely be hugely
Fable.
Successful.
As much as I do like all three Fable games to varying degrees for what they are, Fable is one of the most, like, in terms of living up to the potential of the concept, Fable might fall shorter than almost any other game series I can think of. Like all those games, you play them and you're like, this could be so much more than this. Like, there's so much potential to that concept. And it always felt like they just barely got this thing out the door, like in this rudimentary form, no matter how
overpromise,
much they kept going
underdeliver. That's the Fable song.
Like, even when Fable 3, I think Fable 3 is the closest they got to the scope they were really after. But even then, like, replayed that a couple years ago, and even then, like, and of course, like, immediately after I finished it, they revamped it for Xbox One, like enhanced for Xbox One. Like, I played it backwards compatible on Xbox One, but then, like, literally a week after I finished it, they're like, oh, here it is now, enhanced for Xbox One. And like, I'd been playing this, like, the sound didn't work. It echoed weird, like a bunch of graphical glitches everywhere. I'm saying, okay, if I'd waited a month, it would have been fine. But it's just like, that game really comes close to having the scope that I think Fable really wants to have, and it just doesn't get there. And I would love to see, I don't know. We don't know how the team that made Forza Horizon, or the company that made Forza Horizon, rather, is going to handle melee combat, obviously. But they certainly know how to make a place, how to make a world, how to make a place that feels like a place. And that is one of the issues that Fable has had, is just it always feels like you're playing on these tiny little sets and not in a world.
Yeah, so that's a really good observation, actually.
So I would be, if that is in fact what's happening, other half of Playground is in fact making a new Fable, I will be very interested to see what they do with that.
Yeah, I'm still nervous because, they've never made a game like that before, but I'm also very excited that we may get another Fable. And the truth is, there's so many studios under Microsoft's umbrella now, and they're all sharing tech and code and all this. They're collaborating together. And so I feel in a lot of ways the tide can rise all the boats under Microsoft's portfolio.
I think that's the plan. Yeah. And now it looks like they might be the front runner on the WB purchase.
That nice segue, Matt. That was the next
very interesting scenario.
Yeah. So today a story broke that Microsoft has become one of the front runners to purchase WB Games. WB Games, if you aren't familiar, they make the Batman Arkham games. They make all the Lord of the Rings games. They make all the Lego games.
Harry Potter. It's Mortal Kombat. Like, it's
big stuff.
It's a bit. If for $4 billion, you assume all that kind of stuff is included. Because otherwise, it's not worth anything.
Yeah.
But imagine all that only on Xbox.
Could that be a game changer, Matt? That could potentially turn the tide of Generation 9? Because right now, I'll be honest with you, it's hard for me to see Microsoft having a chance as things sit right now. I think it'll do okay, and I think they'll make money.
Yeah, I just think.
As far as
I agree that I think that unless they come out swinging with reinventions of things in ways that we just have never seen from them before, which is possible, but obviously history tells us different. Like, it feels like Xbox is doomed to being also ran this generation, and maybe through no fault of its own. It might just be that no one could compete with Sony's first party lineup, but except Nintendo. But Nintendo is not trying to compete.
They're not playing the same sport.
They're not playing the same sport. No, and that would go along. That would be a feather in the cap at the very least. Like, and the question becomes like. So there's been a lot of talk. Oh my God, exclusive Batman on Xbox and PC, exclusive Lego. So all that stuff is an interesting idea. But then when you think about it, here's the rub to that. Almost all those things are licenses. Yeah. So if you're Lego, are you going to be happy with the idea that your Lego games, which let's face it, are there to promote Lego as something to buy the physical sets and play with Lego in real life? Like, that's the point, is to endear children and their parents to Lego and get them to buy the real life sets. Are you going to be happy that all of a sudden you're not on Nintendo and Sony platforms because Microsoft bought the game company? Like, that feels like something that if I'm that licensor, I feel like I'm going to start shopping around at that point.
Microsoft would have to provide a make good with money.
My guess
we'll give you more money to offset your losses in these other areas.
Yeah, so my guess on that would be at the very least, I would think stuff like Lego and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings would have to remain multi-platform. Or
someone's asking in chat, actually, is there a chance that they could still be multi-platform?
There definitely is. And
Jam Rain 99 is asking.
Or Microsoft just coughs up a whole bunch of cash at the licensors to keep them happy and say, this will make up for the amount of money you're losing from not selling on the other platforms. What would be the deciding factor there is whether the licensors are more worried about the cash from the sales on the other platforms, or if they're more worried about the exposure from being on all the other platforms. And for Lego, I think exposure is probably more important.
The latter. Yeah.
And Harry Potter, I would think exposure is more important.
And I was going to say, on top of that, you think about it, Microsoft acquired so many studios recently within the last couple of years that these projects that those studios are working on probably aren't ready in the next 18 months, or it's going to be close, where if they purchase WB, they have Suicide Squad probably ready to go pretty soon. They have Harry Potter ready to go next year. That would be a great advantage to them. That could turn the tide. But yeah, there is that big hiccup, Matt, of will the licensee allow that? And I think that's the biggest question mark that maybe might stop Microsoft from being able to purchase them.
Well, and also those games you mentioned, they would still be multi-platform because legally, I don't think you can suddenly say we are not going to release these games as your contract said they were.
Yeah, if those games are multi-platform, they're going to be multi-platform.
That's right,
so it would be their next projects that would be potentially Microsoft exclusive. And then you start to get into the question of, do these licensors even want to stick around? And then you paid $4 billion for nothing.
That's right, because Outer Worlds had to be multi-platform, even though they bought Obsidian before.
There's been several games.
Contracts are in place. Deals are already in place. You can't really renege on that, even if the company changes hands.
Yep. So do you guys think that is something that could potentially turn the tide? Do you think Microsoft could win if it were to? I mean, that's a big purchase, but
I don't know if it could win, but it wouldn't hurt. If you have to buy an Xbox to play Mortal Kombat,
that's a big deal.
That's not nothing.
Yeah. I mean, it sells 10 million copies every freaking time. So that's a gigantic deal. Harry Potter, gigantic deal. Maybe not as big as he once was, but a first
and keeping it on PC. I mean, anything on Xbox will also be on Windows. So that's
Well, I mean, the other thing to keep in mind here, to what Mitch was talking about still maybe releasing stuff on multiple platforms besides PC or Xbox, is that Microsoft of the big three has been the one more open to that stuff.
And they are friendly with Nintendo. I could definitely see putting the Lego
games,
stuff on Nintendo.
They've released games based on Rare's IP on Nintendo's handhelds for years, because it's we don't have a handheld, but this is going to build our IP and we'll make some money in the process. It's a win-win.
Kind of just being friendly with everybody except Sony could be an interesting strategy.
Yeah, you're right. So I think this is kind of the trump card for Microsoft. I think this is one thing that could at least make them competitive with PlayStation.
And you got to wonder if, like, you know, if I'm Microsoft and I'm thinking about this purchase, the bigger thing in terms of exclusives and kind of filling in that library that I'm thinking about is if Sony's got Spider-Man, we want Batman.
Yeah. Marvel versus DC. It'll never end. Yeah. I mean, that you're right. That's another angle to it. They're like, they got one of the most iconic superheroes locked down, and maybe we can do the same.
And a formula that's ready to go that has, for some freaking reason, not been exploited for half a decade. Look, I didn't like Arkham Knight, but I would have bought a new Batman game every couple of years if you wanted to put them out, even if they were uninspired clones, because I just like that formula.
And that might be a concern too, is that Rocksteady has turned into the next Naughty Dog apparently, and has decided to take a really long time to make its games now.
Well, I doubt they've been working on Suicide Squad that whole time. I feel like a lot of behind the scenes shifting has occurred.
They also had the VR game they worked on before that.
Yeah, they did. I don't think that was their whole. I think that was a sub team kind of.
Sure, but there was something they were working on that they weren't putting resources towards.
Yeah, it's just I don't think the VR game was notable in that regard. I think, you know, they've got a lot of people, and that VR game probably took a much smaller team,
like 5 or 10 people probably
for a lot of it, probably until like final stretch. That was probably almost a side project for a bunch of people. It's also like 2 hours long. I don't know. It's going to be real interesting to see what Suicide Squad looks like, and, you know, no Rocksteady for half a decade. Like what are they gonna come out swinging with?
Would you be nervous to spend $4 billion for sure?
Oh yeah, I mean, on anything really, except Star Wars.
I'd be nervous spending $4 billion.
But think about that. Like, that is the same amount of money that Disney paid for Lucasfilm. And that was all of Star Wars, all of Indiana Jones, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And
to me, the price still is too high. I mean, I'll just be honest.
The price. The price.
I would not spend $4 billion for WB. I just wouldn't.
No, neither would I. The price for that for Star Wars is actually pretty low.
Oh, dude, they got the deal of the century on Star Wars. They've made their money back like 3 times already. Like, is the best investment ever.
The caveat being that they don't have creative control over Lucasfilm.
Right.
Which actually has turned out to be kind of a problem.
Yeah.
In the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But like, there's no way. I don't know what the behind the scenes dealings would be in terms of the licensing, but like, that would have to come with, like, you get like 3 more Batman games after this, and 3, like, I don't like the lawyers must be dripping, like, just drooling over having to negotiate this. Like, people are going to be charging. Oh yeah, they're going to be charging some fees for years to come on this. Like, you're going to need an in-house fleet of lawyers.
You know how many people will get rich off that sale? Like, hundreds of people will become, if they're not already, they'll just become more wealthy from that deal.
Well, I have a question for you guys, since we formulated saying that mainly the license is going to be the issue on this. Do you think that WB will walk away from a deal with Microsoft to take a deal with someone like 2K, Activision, someone that isn't going to be beholden to a certain console? Do you think they'll walk away from a deal because they're not satisfied with the license?
I think that's entirely possible.
I didn't understand the question.
He's saying, do you think that if Warner Brothers has an offer from Microsoft and maybe a lesser offer from Take-Two, they'll go with Take-Two because Take-Two isn't going to lock their properties to one platform?
Oh.
And they prefer the exposure. And I think that is possible, depending on how the licensors feel about it.
I don't think that the studios have any say in this. The parent company makes the deal.
No, I mean Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers still owns a bunch of those properties.
Oh, WB Games owns them.
No, Warner Brothers owns them.
Yeah.
So the parent company is making. I mean, okay,
the parent company is AT&T.
AT&T, but like, I think, you know, AT&T is still concerned about the value of, say, Batman, because they still own Batman.
Yeah.
Through owning DC Comics, which is owned by Warner Brothers Studios. And so in a situation where they're like, well, do we want Batman in game form locked to the Xbox moving forward? They might go with Take-Two, because that way they're still getting wider distribution of this Batman property, or DC in general, or Mortal Kombat, or like, because they're still going to hold those properties, those IPs. they're just going to farm out the license for the video games to whoever buys these studios. And like, I could definitely see Warner Brothers and AT&T saying like, well, we would prefer to sell it to someone who's going to put it on everything.
Or they could just look at the sales for Marvel Spider-Man and be like, whatever.
It could, but it's not just sales; it's also just exposure on
mind
all the
share
platforms and getting it. But it also depends who. Microsoft does have the war chest to just be like, "Oh, you don't like that? Here's another $1 billion."
Yeah,
like
I mean, it's really insane.
If they want it, they can. If Microsoft wants it and they're willing to spend the money, they can get it.
Oh yeah, they could buy WB Games right now.
Yeah,
right now.
But if
and they wouldn't even notice the money.
But if they're not willing to do that, and like it comes down to a bidding war between them and say Take-Two, I could see Warner Brothers siding with Take-Two because Take-Two is going to give them more exposure across multiple platforms.
Yeah, both places offered the same money. Absolutely, they would go with Take-Two. But I think Microsoft knows that and would not offer the same money as Take-Two.
He's saying Take-Two would offer less. Microsoft would offer more. But
and they would still go with Take-Two?
He would still go with Take-Two because of the exposure. He prefers, like, you would think
that's a hard algorithm to figure out.
It.
That'd be a very specific situation based on who's
marketing genius to figure out whether that one works out or not.
But I guarantee you, they have people crunching those numbers.
Probably they're trying to figure it out for sure. Yeah.
I think that will be a factor in the bidding war. Is who's going to treat our properties better. And who knows? I mean, it's not like Warner Brothers has been too great at treating their properties well internally to begin with. So, and whether, we also don't know how much AT&T cares as long as the money is there. So like, maybe Warner Brothers will be like, we don't know if we think this is where Batman should be. And AT&T is like, I can't hear you over the sound of my money hat kind of thing. So
covering up my ears.
That is also possible that, that Warner Brothers might not be happy about it, but they don't have a say because that's the parent company is the one making the choice.
Yep.
But I do think, I don't think that's a meaningless question from Mitch. I think that is a concern.
Yeah. Regardless, it's a big deal. Whoever ends up getting WB Games, it's going to be a huge deal. It's going to be a game changer. If Microsoft, in fact, does get imagine if PlayStation got WB Games. I mean,
I don't think PlayStation cares.
Rubbing salt in the wound at that point.
And also you're talking about the American publishing rights for CD Projekt Red's games.
That's true. Yeah, WB is going to publish Cyberpunk 2077 in the US. Yeah,
and they just like they published Witcher 3.
They may publish in Japan too. Actually,
that might be right. They don't. Yeah, that sounds right.
I think they do.
Sure.
I think I was talking to Kay Howe, their PR lead, and she was telling me that they publish a lot of stuff in Japan and
it's not nothing. Yeah.
No. I mean, relatively speaking, it is. But
but it's still you still get to put the most talked about game on the internet in your booth at E3.
You're probably still making another $10 million, $20 million.
Yeah, on your financial call at the end of the year, you get to say you were involved in that, and I guarantee you, Cyberpunk's going to be one of the things people are talking about this holiday season, assuming it comes out.
Yeah.
That's another feather in the cap.
Yep. Okay, let's move on. We're going to talk next about something not as fun as the Xbox Series X first party reveal event.
Well, we don't know. We haven't seen the reveal event yet.
That's true. Oh, Matt, don't even say that. They don't even know what the topic is yet. We are going to talk about toxic gamers. I mean, that really is what the topic is about. This is spurred on by the fact that a female voice actor from The Last of Us Part 2 has begun receiving death threats. I can't call them fans because they're obviously not fans. She's receiving death threats from gamers over something her fictional character did in a fake video game. Mm-hmm. Think about that for a second. Something her fake character did in a fake video game.
That
very
she
common.
Didn't write.
That she didn't write.
Yeah. Very, very common.
She didn't design. She literally went into a studio for 3 days and spoke into a microphone. Come on, people.
She also mocapped it.
She mocapped it.
Oh, she did do the mocap? Oh, God, Matt, you should have brought that up. Oh, they've got their way in.
Now, Shane, do you think this... I saw some of your comments. You think this is new?
I do. For gaming at this level, yes.
This is just a crazy fandom thing. Like, this has been going on since long before games. This goes back to the 50s and 60s where people would stalk soap opera stars and throw things at them because they did mean things in the soap opera they started.
I know.
Like this
I know. I know it's not something new. It's just it's become so prevalent at this point that it needs to be addressed. It's kind of like, well, no, I want to say that because I don't want to equate it to something really, really important. But anyway, it is something that has been an issue, but it's escalated, at least due to the media I'm consuming and the places I'm going on the internet. It has escalated in the last couple of years to a place where it's really on my radar now, where it was before it was something I knew was there and I had to deal with every once in a while, but it was just kind of in the back of my mind as something I could just kind of ignore or blow off. But I feel like now we've reached the point where we can't do that anymore.
I think a lot of women in the industry would say that they haven't been able to ignore or blow it off since 2014.
Right. Again, I'm a white dude, you know. I'm privileged in that way that I don't have to deal with a lot of the crap other people have to. But now...
Also, again, I think people are more comfortable like coming out and saying like, hey, this is happening to me now.
Yeah, that's true. They're not as afraid anymore because they know that there's a lot of people who are going to have their back, and I'm one of them. So... But here's the question. Look, I think everyone's going to agree that this sucks and nobody likes these gamers. Nobody wants these people going out and making us all look terrible. I mean, these are the people who are upholding the stereotypes about gamers. They're the people who are upholding the stigmas around gaming in general. Most people who play games are sick of that crap and they want it to go away. And these idiots are the ones who are keeping it around. But the question becomes, what can you do? Matt, do you have any idea of what we've talked, like, I think the first year of GameFace, we talked about online ID and having to use your real name online. And I think over time, we've just realized that's probably never going to happen. So is there... And
even if it did, it doesn't matter.
It really does.
Like, I think we've learned since then it doesn't matter. You've got people out there in the street screaming racist epithets at people on camera with their face uncovered, like, you know, they have no problem like being seen. Like you saw, like, you know,
I think
for a while
they're trying to go viral now, honestly.
Some of that, but like for a while you saw like kind of comment sections shifting to using Facebook as sort of a login, so you had to use your real name. Didn't change anything. People are still horrible monsters. Even
you can still create fake accounts on Facebook.
Yeah, or they really do use their real name and they don't care.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, I'm appalled by some of the stuff people post on Facebook with their real names. I'm like, really? At least you're owning it, I guess.
Now, I don't know I think basically the best you can do is sort of what she did. She said, I'm getting these, here are the messages I'm getting. This is great. And Neil Druckmann did the same thing. People have been sending him death threats and horrible anti-Semitic stuff and like, all, you know, the same thing, like all over, you know, as Ben Affleck said in was it Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, fictional characters. You know, it doesn't. It's extremely weird. I do not understand. I even as somebody who gets very involved in fiction and will argue with you about Star Wars all night if you let me. Like getting so involved in this that you get angry at the people who played the characters or wrote the story for what happened. I mean, I'm angry at J.J. Abrams for what he turned Rise of Skywalker into, but I would never write him and tell him that. Like,
do you think you would have when you were like 13, maybe?
No, like that's not, no, there's no relationship there. He didn't do it to personally insult me. Like what he was doing was not meant to make my life miserable. It just did because it was terrible. But it's not something that like, you know, I don't know. I guess you have to have your identity wrapped up in these things a little more than I do in order to feel like you have had your quality of life damaged to the point that you want to say something like that to someone who is a complete stranger and has nothing to do with deciding the content. And and there's a lot of, you know, as evidenced by the messages she got, like there's also just a ton of misogyny there. There's a ton of transphobia there. There's a ton of, you know, some of this is just the usual toxic, like quote, anti-SJW bullshit that you see from all the people that are screaming about how everything's too woke and everything's too PC. And in reality, it's just like, yeah.
AKA, I can't be an asshole anymore and get away with it.
Yeah, exactly. Like say it without being a PC. It's like, I hate that I can't insult women and minorities without being called on it anymore. That's what that means. That's all that means.
I know.
And I know very well. I know you know, but like it's just the people that are doing this clearly don't know. And
well, they think that we don't know. That's the thing. They think that they're sly, and it's like, no, we've got you figured out, people. We've been dealing with your kind for way, way too long. But again, circling back around, what can we do? What can be done?
Nothing.
There's nothing that can be done, is there?
Like you call them out when you can, you block them when they harass you. You call the police if they really do get the credible threat becomes a credible threat. And you just let people know what's going on. I think that's the best you can do. And then let kind of the community react to it. Because obviously I've seen way more people saying like, hey, this is wrong. Stop doing that. This is bullshit. Than I've seen people saying like, you know what? Those guys have a point. Like it's not a reaction you see much other than like, every once in a while. I mean, I have seen it more for the backlash on Last of Us 2, I think, than anything since probably The Last Jedi, where people would bring up like the horrible abuse that the people involved in the production are suffering, much like Kelly Marie Tran with Rose Tico and that kind of thing, who's bullied off the internet basically because she didn't want to deal with it anymore. And you see in responses mostly like, oh, this is terrible. Like she shouldn't be getting this kind of abuse. Neil shouldn't be getting this kind of abuse. But then you'll see like, you shouldn't be getting this kind of abuse, but the story is complete trash. And it's just like, that is not a helpful contribution, sir. There should be no but after the condemnation of the death threat and that kind of thing.
I'm still just shocked that so many people feel that way. I really am. Like, I just can't even compute it. Like, what story in games do you think is better? Please share one, because I want to go play that game. Please. Like, I don't get it. I can understand you saying, like, I didn't like what they did to the characters, or I didn't like this part of the plot or that plot. Calling it bad, that does not compute.
Well, also remember that there's no nuance on the internet. It's like, it's not about...
It's 100 or 0. Like, that's pretty much it. You either love it or you hate it.
Yeah, you can't like have any kind of midway conversation. It's like, I thought this isn't what I would have done, but like I see where you're taking it here. And I know a lot of people that like, one of the things that happens that everybody's mad about, I've seen some things where like people just stopped when it happened, didn't play any further. And I'm like, well, then you can't really critique the rest of the game. You can't even critique the game then, can you? Because you didn't see the rest. It's like turning a movie off because you didn't like what happened in the first act.
Well, I saw people put up reviews like on Twitter, like their own personal review, and being like, I didn't finish, and I was like, then you can't say anything.
Then what are you doing?
Especially on this game, you can't give a review on a game without finishing it, especially one like this.
Well, something like this game, I mean, something that's so fully narratively driven, and something that like, the ending of this game really matters. Like I've been, a couple people I know have been playing it, now playing through it. And like one of them keeps trying to predict what's going to happen. And I'm like, you are not going to, I keep turning into Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. This is not going to go the way you think it is.
I do love that line. You can use it so many times.
And it just, it is funny because I was really rushing to try to get the game done in time to talk about it on Spoiled. And I was like, I was hitting a point where I'm like, well, like I was texting Mitch, like, well, if I don't make it, like maybe I can just come in and talk about it, and like I'll leave when you guys talk about the ending. And then once I finish it, I'm just like, yeah, if you haven't finished the whole game, your opinion in that discussion is useless.
Yeah,
because
when you
don't have
that,
the full context of it.
I don't know if he can really do that. I mean, he can,
and with 99% of other video games, you could do that.
Yeah, you could for the most part.
Plenty of video games that are just like, okay, I played 40 hours of this, I got it, like I'm good. But this, because it's so narratively driven and so not necessarily inventive, but the watchword of Last of Us 2 is basically withholding. Like they're withholding information because of the contextualization of the rest of the story that is impacted strongly by telling you that information when it's appropriate. And very few anythings do that well, let alone just video games. As I've said, I think it's one of the best examples of telling a story out of order I've seen in modern media. And you may not like.
Although I did end up getting confused, if you remember, it did end up confusing me a little bit because remember I had forgotten the order of one of the events.
Right. But there's a lot happening, so that's understandable. Yeah. I think. I'm not going to do it anytime soon because there's other things to do. Ghost of Tsushima's right on deck, but I am interested to play it again, knowing the whole story and to see what it plays like knowing things beforehand.
I am
that I
waiting
didn't know
for
before.
that.
It does play different. I mean, I haven't finished it on my second playthrough, but I got probably halfway.
It's been like 2 weeks, Mitch. What are you doing? Come on.
Are there hints like that you didn't notice the first time?
Yeah, there's things I definitely missed the first time, especially understanding the relationships between the characters at that moment. Like even the beginning is extremely different because of the context of understanding actually things beating the game. So I think it is something that is worth playing a second time for that reason of understanding the storytelling. But to go back to your point, Shane, in regards to like what can we do, Matt did bring up a great point, and I think just to piggyback on a little bit is when they did post the actress, I forgot her name now, was it Lauren?
Don't even give it, because maybe somebody goes and harasses her now.
Gotcha. But anyways, when she posted them, people in the community supported her by contacting those people and saying, what were you doing? And ended up, one of them responded back to her tweet and said, I apologize, that was inappropriate, I finished everything and I was doing it out of spite, and I take everything back that I said and I completely apologize. And at least, so
public shaming, you're saying, may
public
work.
Shaming does work. I mean, and so, and people do suffer consequences when this thing becomes public. If someone says a racist remark, they're going to lose their job potentially. There's many people that happens to. And so the only thing you can do is make sure that the people that are doing these horrible things to other people suffer consequences that do hit home to them, and understand that this is not okay. Because I think
for the vast majority of them, though, there's no repercussions. They're using a burner account on Twitter. The problem with Twitter is that it is really anonymous. Like,
I think Facebook, it's much more...
Facebook is way more aggro in getting rid of fake accounts. In fact, I started an account for a sports website that would only take comments from Facebook. And I didn't want to use my normal Facebook account to make a bunch of sports comments and bother people who are my friends on Facebook. So I started a fake Facebook account just to comment on the sports website. And within a month, it was shut down. They somehow had figured out that it was a fake account. And I got an email, said this account's fake. We're shutting it down. So Facebook's way better at that stuff than Twitter is. Twitter is just like the Wild West, man. There's so many burner accounts.
Fortunately, they have the tools to be able to weed out those people for if you're getting the insults. You have blocking,
but they don't. Muting. Oh yeah, you personally can. You can block somebody.
Yeah, for not them mitigating the interwebs of Twitter. I mean, they give the people the power, which is helpful to say, most people, someone like Jason Schreier, I've seen him have comments before, especially with his conversation with some developers recently, that he just states that if you're going to be saying these types of insults, I'm just going to block you. So it doesn't matter. But it does. And I think it's inappropriate for what these people have said to not only this person, but other people. And that it's just not okay. I think the last time I've seen something this big would have been Mass Effect 3. I think that's probably the last time where it hit major. And I think part of the pandemic has helped with this because people are at home and have nothing better to do than be on Twitter all the time. I admit to it. I'm on Twitter more than I've ever been. Because
I'm not. I've never really used Twitter that much anyway, though, so I guess it doesn't really make a difference for me. Is really though the answer to this just parenting? I mean, you got to start when you're young, raising your kids the right way.
But it's
to some degree.
There's
a lot of these people are radicalized by weird YouTube speakers, and they've just gone down this rabbit hole. 4chan, just kind of the weird alt-right stuff that that it claims to not be, but clearly is sort of a gateway to that. It's insidious, and it's hard to track, and it's hard to know what your kid is watching all the time, especially in this world where everybody's online at all times. And the irony of it is that one of the core themes of the game is empathy for the other, and the people that are doing this probably need to hear that message more than any of the rest of us do.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're just it's because it's funny, because I was thinking about it while I was playing it, especially in terms of the cult members of the two factions that you fight. They reminded me of these people.
The Seraphites?
Yeah, like the Seraphites had some of that going on. You know, it was clearly, at least in part, a response to that kind of mentality. And
or you can even relate to the current political climate of two sides that have misconceptions of each other, of how they view things, or and that there's this bitter
I don't think there's too many misconceptions.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear.
Go any other direction, frankly. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's part. I mean, that's just when they started working on this game, that would have been less polarized 7 years ago. Yeah, it's funny to me that like a game that's so much about dealing with rage and hatred and empathy and self-reflection is being lambasted by people who really need to deal with all four of those things. So
Vincent has an interesting quote in chat that I'm struggling to understand. He says, when people keep pushing their purity, don't be surprised when people lash out. Why? Why should I not be surprised if somebody lashes out because someone else is pure?
I don't know. I don't know what that means either, frankly.
Yeah, I don't understand what he means either.
I won't accept that.
It doesn't sound like a very positive thing to say, though.
It definitely does not, and I will not accept that either. I just won't. So, look, you're right. Kids eventually can get radicalized in a number of different ways, but I do think if you're a good parent, they're going to have that foundation, and I think that they will come back to that foundation eventually. They may dip out of it for a little bit, but I mean, the truth is they've been indoctrinated and they've been basically brainwashed to be good people, which when you're talking about brainwashing, that's good, I guess. But the truth of the matter is that they have been brainwashed to be good people, and eventually they will return to it. Whatever you're indoctrinated into as a kid, it is very hard to break away from for the rest of your life. It just is.
I think that's tricky to kind of, I blanket it in that way. I think it's, it is a combination of nature and nurture at the same time, of how people react to things or how they view things, because how many times I've heard the quote of, how did I raise you to be this way? It comes up so many times, and it's because the parent isn't there with them 24/7. And so,
well, just like I said, you dip out, you come back.
I don't think they always come back, though. It really depends on their viewpoint and how they
I think
view
this
life.
might be a perspective that you gain as you get a little older, maybe.
No, I pretty much agree with Mitch.
Really?
Like, plenty of people that have fallen victim to this.
I can just tell you, I'm dealing with some personal stuff right now.
Sure.
That if I could be candid with you, I would vehemently disagree right now.
Well, I'm not saying it's universally true, but I'm saying a lot of those people, you never get them back.
I can give you plenty of examples as well, personally, I know that are older people that don't go back, or can't go back, or haven't been able to go back. And, maybe... You
mean that they've been altered later in life?
That they've either been altered later in life, or they've been altered early in their life, and they just have never gone back. And
I don't understand why you're saying old people.
I'm just saying
I don't think the old people is relevant. I don't see what that has to do with anything.
I don't either.
Sorry, I'm just trying to say...
I'm talking to you, Shane, on that. I don't know it doesn't matter how old they are. What Mitch is saying is, like, if you lose some of the radicalization, there is a good chance you are never getting them back.
And I'm trying to say it doesn't matter what age it is.
And it doesn't matter what age they are. It used to happen to older people more often, because now it's easier to get to the younger people because of YouTube and because of the internet, and younger generations being extremely online. But this is the same thing that Fox News did to old people.
But look, I wasn't saying like you go from being a good person to being the grand wizard of the KKK. I was saying you're a good person who maybe dabbles in some things that aren't great, but eventually you come back to your center. I just don't think you go from like being a good Christian kid to part of ISIS that you're coming back. But if you are, let's say you were raised religiously, and you, in a certain part in your life, you kind of reject it and you start drinking and partying. Most of those people end up going back to religion. Usually they hit rock bottom and they go crawling back to their church. I mean, that's just the way it is.
I think that's unfair. I think that's an unfair blanket statement. I don't think it is that way.
Then explain why.
I think it's case by case. Everyone is different. Not everyone experiences the hardships the same way and reverts back to whatever they feel is comfortable.
But no one's talking in absolutes here, Mitch. I never said every single person. I said the majority of them. And I do believe that the majority of them will. It is very hard to fight what you were taught when you were a child. It just is. It's
a lot of these people were
embedded in your brain.
A lot of these people are simply enhancing what they were taught as children. Mm-hmm. The misogyny is built in. The racism is built in.
That's what I'm talking about.
The violence is built in.
That's what I'm talking about. They were taught by their parents to be this way. Mm-hmm. They didn't just become that way. And that's why I say parenting is the key. You have to start at the beginning. You have to raise your kids the right way and teach them the right morals. And they will have a foundation. They may stray as they get older, but they will have a foundation for morality. And I don't think you'll see them doing stuff
right.
Like
but I'm saying that
now.
I'm saying that a lot of the people that are in that situation now, like what you're talking about, they were taught a lot of those values by their parents, and those parents would consider those to be values.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know. You're right. You're right. Oh, yeah. There's tons of parents out there. They see their kids at a KKK rally, and they're like, damn, I raised him right. Damn right. I raised an American. It's crazy, dude.
Well, I guess,
but again, they're teaching their kids to be bad kids, and they grow up to be bad kids. I mean,
but they would never agree with that being bad. So it's like it's a very hard battle to fight, because you're basically saying like your ethos is wrong, and no one wants to hear that from anyone, you know?
Yeah. And then there are people that are just really good at making it seem like they're a good person. And in reality, they're not. And they just put on airs when they're around certain people, but in actuality, they're just bad. And I think sometimes those people are misdiagnosed as people who fell off. The truth is they were bad all along. Mm-hmm. They were just very good at hiding it. So
I think that's also what's happening here to some degree is as the polarization and division gets deeper, you've got, in the last 4 years, we've seen people suddenly think that they don't need to hide this kind of thing anymore. And then get very offended and freaked out when they get called on it or suffer consequences from it, of course. Yeah. But I think that's part of it is like a lot of this was always there and it was hidden for a long time. And now there's a bunch of people that are saying like, oh, I don't have to hide it. Or, and I think that is why, and I've come more around to that idea in the last several years. Whereas like, I think back near the beginning of Sifted, you and I agreed that like, oh, if you make it more personalized and make it more like you have to post under your real name, you'll lose a lot of, the anonymity, the old penny arcade, internet anonymity factor idea. But I think as we've moved into this era of the last 4 years in Trump's America, basically, you've got these like people with these insidious, bigoted bullshit opinions who think that it's okay to be that now. And they just kind of come out and say it.
When you have the leader of the United States.
Right.
That's right. And that's why I made the statement, Shane, of like calling out those people, because now is the time that people think that's okay. And they're not afraid to hide behind a fake name no longer. Well,
I mean, a lot of them have never been afraid. I mean, I grew up in Pennsylvania. Dude, those people there don't care. They've never cared.
I would say it's escalated, though. Like, they may have said, like, an offshoot comment every now and then where you would, like, say, okay, this person probably is a racist of some capacity. But I think now more than ever, it's to the point where people aren't afraid to, like Matt said, speak anymore. And so to fight this is to point it out to people and, again, have those people suffer consequences. Like some people lose their jobs because that's not something that the business values, fortunately, thank God, because that's the great thing to do.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it's like there now, because it was bad back when I lived there in like the 90s and early aughts. And now I can't even imagine. I mean, I go there for Christmas for a few days. But when I lived there, it was
too cold to be out. So
yeah, exactly. You're not really interacting with.
You got to get the quilted clan robes for that. But I mean, probably and I think it's all kind of part of the same phenomenon that you end up with someone who feels that they are wounded enough by the inclusion of non-white people or non-straight people in a video game they wanted to play. That they think it's reasonable to send a death threat to the person who was involved in that. Like, it's like, I can't claim to understand the mentality, but I do see it as part of this ongoing evolving trend of like feeling like it's okay to have your worst instincts, worst opinions, worst behaviors right there on display as like your face to the world.
Yeah.
Like the masks are off, as they say, and I know that it holds a little more relevance now in America today. But I mean, but that's also, I think, a lot of the same people doing that.
Yeah. I think Mitch was probably right. I mean, the only real tactic that we have other than good parenting, and we're not their parents, so we can't affect that change, is really just calling people out when they do it. Like whether
say something is really, it's like, and I think as white men, especially older, like we have, we like it or not, societally, our voices carry weight. When someone who looks like these other people maybe is saying like, no, that's not okay, like they're going to listen more. That's a psychologically proven thing. So that's why it's important for people
before they call you a traitor.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends who you run into. I mean, like sometimes someone will back down, sometimes it causes a problem. But I'm just saying, we're a lot bigger than, like, say, Anita Sarkeesian if she was going to say something to somebody in the street.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there is a physical element to it as well. But yeah, I think that's all we can really do is just call it out when you see it. And you don't have to sink to their level when you do it. You don't have to call them awful names. You don't have to be toxic like they were.
You say no. That's not okay.
Just let them know that it's wrong. That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
Be better than them.
It's not okay.
Let them know it's wrong.
People don't deserve death threats for doing their entertainment job.
Their job. Imagine if I...
And let's also be clear. The writer of the game doesn't deserve that either. Like that is not, it's not...
Cinetike also says encouraging... the people who are targeted could help as well. Yeah. He's right. He's absolutely right.
Yeah, you have to let the people who are being targeted know that there are other people who are there for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
The support is more important in a lot of cases than the condemnation of the attacker.
Absolutely. I'm sure all of us have been really down at a point in our lives, and you probably remember that one person that came to you or took the time to talk to you that made the difference, that got you over the hump. These are real people. These aren't just ones and zeros on the internet. And
that's what happened in this situation was people reached out to her and supported her. Even developers, Neil Druckmann, everyone reached out and retweeted and just said, this isn't okay, and we're here to support you. So
remember, this kind of creative work, especially when you're doing the mocapping and doing the performance capture and all that as well, like this is an emotionally raw job that these people have. And you put yourself out there and you put yourself emotionally and sort of ego-wise on the line. I mean, you may have to make yourself vulnerable to get good performances out of things, especially in terms of like these harrowing emotional arcs that these characters go through in this game. And like having someone kind of come at you toxically like that after having done that is, she's more, whether she likes it or not, whether anyone in that situation likes it or not, you're more vulnerable to that because you have put, part of yourself in there.
If you're a creator,
it makes it even worse.
Yeah. If you're a creator, you're always vulnerable. And that was one of the hardest things for me to get over working in entertainment, was always being a target, that you could work so hard on something and dedicate so much of yourself to it and be so proud of it. And then you give it to the world and the first person says it sucks.
Yeah. But also the other thing is,
it's devastating.
I've poked around a bit on like criticisms of the, like negative reviews or criticisms of the game. I have yet to see anything particularly coherent in terms of criticizing it. Like, it's just, I don't like thing, or I didn't imagine it was going to be like this, which is fine. You don't have to like it, but don't pretend that that's cogent criticism.
And don't pretend that that means it sucks, because it doesn't mean it sucks. It just means that you don't like it. There's a big, big difference. Okay, let's move on to another topic that's really depressing for most people. This week, Take-Two announced that...
I forgot about this. I thought you were going on to the next one.
No.
I was like, why is that depressing? It wasn't that great, but it wasn't depressing.
No, this story is depressing. So this week, Take-Two announced that the next-gen versions of NBA 2K21 will cost $70. And following up on that, as that story broke, we started seeing reports from people who said, I just filled out a survey from EA that asked me about that. Or I just talked to a Ubisoft rep who was asking me about $70. So this isn't an anomaly. This isn't just Take-Two. This is, depending on how people react to this, and I'll say this as well, it may be too late already now, this could become a permanent thing. And at this point, I'm leaning towards it is going to become a permanent thing, because the news went out and there was really no outrage. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing or anything like that. But the truth is that when the news came out, there was an outrage from consumers and gamers. And that is what the whole industry was watching for. They're like, oh, wow, Take-Two is going to do it. Let me get my popcorn and see how people react to it. And the truth is, most people were just like, it's okay. Like, I ran a poll on my Twitter account, and like the first option was, I get it. And it won overwhelmingly. So it appears that obviously the people who follow me on Twitter are like the hardest of the hardcore gamers. They're not even casual gamers. They're hardcore gamers. So the hardcore get it. They're like, you know what? I've heard enough horror stories about crunch, about relationships being broken, about people being broken, developing games, that I can recognize that, you know what? They may need a couple, like 10 extra bucks for each game. If I think a lot of people too are looking at it from the perspective of, you know what? If I can give them $10 and it'll keep like 300 families from being put through the ringer for 18 months, then I think I'm okay with that. And I love it. It's so great to see people being so positive around something that really is going, for most of them, is going to be a detriment to them. So I'm glad that we have this topic in here, because we talked earlier about toxic gamers and how we'd like to get rid of them, or we wish they would just leave. But there's the other side of the coin. There are in fact, the vast majority of players are amazing people. Amazing. 98% of the people who have joined Sifted have been amazing people. Like, there have been so few bad people that I remember them all of them. So overall, like, I don't want this show to come off as like, oh, they think gamers are blah, blah, blah. I love gamers. There's just a very small segment of them that are screwing it up for everybody else. And I think this topic showed you that a lot of players are extremely conscientious. They care about the people who are crafting the art for them, and they want those people to be well. So cheers to all of you who voted for that. I was really surprised. Are you surprised by that reaction, Matt?
I mean, not especially, I guess. I do think it's a little disingenuous to think that is what's happening here, because that money is not going to be passed on to the level designers and the texture artists. Like, that's just the publisher's going to get more for their bottom line, and that's the end of it. It's also, I didn't think of it necessarily because I don't play NBA 2K. Obviously, I just put it in my fantasy team for free points. I mentioned like this when that news broke, and someone's like, why would NBA 2K of all things be doing that? Because aren't they like one of the worst microtransaction offenders? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. They are. Like, of all the games that maybe would need to be able to make it up through microtransactions, it would be NBA 2K. But like, if this is just the standard price for games going forward with the next generation, like, that just might just be how it rolls. I say, I'm surprised we made it this far. Yeah. Without the price hike. I mean, with
2005 is when
games have been $60 for 15 years. They have never been cheaper in terms of like what you bang for your buck and how much the buck. I mean, because remember,
you look at inflation.
Yeah, you look at inflation. Back in 1988, 89, you bought an NES game for $50. You maybe finished that thing in an hour, right? Yeah. Like, $50 in 1989 is like $100 now.
A lot.
It's like about double now.
Yeah.
Remember, don't forget cartridge games were more. I mean, I know like it's not. It's a little bit apples to oranges
or extra RAM or anything.
I went out when Phantasy Star 4 came out. I went out and I paid $99.99 for that, which has to work out to about $160, $170 in 2020 money. So like,
yep.
They used to be way more expensive, and they used to be much less than what you get now. And
I mean, you get games now. You pay $60, you can play them for the next 3 years.
And I think the kind of death of the microtransactions. I mean, the microtransactions are still there, but they are not the end-all, be-all business model that publishers were hoping they were going to be at the beginning of this generation. Games as a service seems to be kind of flaming out a little bit. Even Destiny, which that was their whole model, seems to have moved on to like, why don't you just give us like $50 for the next expansion and we'll just call it even, which is much more of a traditional model when you think, that's the old PC model really, for buying expansion packs. I do think, is it Beyond Light? Is that the name of the new thing?
The new what thing?
The new Destiny 2 expansion.
I believe so. I mean,
$70 for the deluxe version of that seems like a lot.
Yeah, okay. For an expansion, you think?
Yeah. But if that's, if we're going to hike the price by $10 moving forward, especially with the inflations and budgets, if that is kind of the reaction to like, well, you won't let us charge you for loot boxes, then I guess we'll just do this. Fair.
Yeah.
Fine.
Matt, do you think that they're trying to, so as you said, the money's not going to trickle down to the developers, and I agree with that a billion %. So the publishers obviously believe that they need to charge more money per game. Do you think it's because the publishers want to build bigger games that live on longer, like games as a service? Do you think that they've become so expensive to develop, almost prohibitively expensive, that they're too big of a risk and the publishers don't want to take it anymore?
I think that's part of it. I also think that, I think we've seen definitively that you can't count on a game as a service to be around as long as your, budgetary projections indicate it needs to be to make the money you want. It's better I think it's going to always prove to be better that you make the game, you release the game, you make your money in the first month, 2 months of release, and that's everything else is gravy. That's the model. And with the budgets going up and up and up, tacking an extra $10 on the MSRP, that seems to be the safest bet in terms of keeping your studios in the black, and in terms of coming up with something that is more upfront and not as devious and not as frowned upon as microtransactions. Because I think most people would rather pay the extra $10 at launch than to feel like they're getting nickel and dimed by things that could otherwise already be in the game.
Do you think that stuff will go away if they charge an extra $10?
I think that depends on the publisher.
I don't think it will, man. I think that they're just going to keep double dipping.
I think it depends. I think most of Sony's stuff will continue to not have that kind of thing in it. I think I think EA might get a little gun shy about it. I'm kind of holding back to see how Squadrons does, and I'm interested. I wish I could say I'm holding back to see what other games they're going to put out, but I can't think.
There aren't any. Well, Madden and FIFA.
I mean,
they're the worst of them
guaranteed. All. Yeah, sports games I think are a lost cause.
It's never coming back, man.
And
ever.
Yeah, maybe the new Need for Speed. I don't know.
Probably.
I guess the other kind of canary in that coal mine would be we will see if it ever actually happens and gets finished, what the revamp of Anthem looks like.
Yeah. Which will probably be a year from now, somewhere like that.
It would be I would be interested. I'm interested to see what they do with that, because however they reinvent Anthem is probably a pretty good model for how EA thinks they need to act going forward.
Because they've taken all the data from that game. I mean, it's their biggest gas. And so they've used all the data from that to reshape that game. I agree with you 100% that data, that information, that perspective is going to shape EA's future products. Guaranteed. Big thanks to Tiny2K, who has been lighting up the chat with emotes. JM Rain 99 has been giving us a bunch of cash. You guys are freaking awesome. We're at level 4 of the hype train already. We got an hour to go. You guys are awesome. Mitch, how do you feel about $70 games? Do you have any strong feelings either way?
It's ridiculous. It should not.
You mean you're upset, or you just don't care that?
I think people may not reacted to this as big as you thought, Shane, because people have bigger things to worry about. And so they're.
You did say people are all over Twitter, though.
People are all over Twitter, but that
they're complaining about more important things.
Yeah,
the blot of The Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah, I mean, but even though those are. Yes, but at the same time, I think the exposure of this news story did not get to the heights of what The Last of Us Part 2 has gotten.
It was on CNN. This story was on CNN. I saw it on CNN.com.
But on Twitter, where
I don't know. I don't spend enough time there. It wasn't
really there. You posted it. I think
nobody cared. We tweeted it on Sifted, and 3 people replied to it.
But it was around, but it's just I think I'm interested to see if it is in fact the new price point.
Yeah,
I'm interested to see what happens when people actually have to put their money down on the table. Basically,
because I'm really nervous to do so. I may have to pass on more games because I can't afford it. And now, even in this economy that people are in, How are people going to afford
probably not
$70
the right time
games?
to jack up the
yeah,
price
why in
of
the
anything?
hell are you jacking up to $70 when a vast, 20% are unemployed still in the United States?
That's like your landlord jacking up your rent when the whole building's empty.
Well, some people have to worry about rent at the end of this month. Like,
they're freaking out right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just millions of people who didn't pay rent.
Well,
and maybe thrown out onto the street.
Well, and on top of that, after this month, the federal addition to your unemployment goes away, like for myself. Yep. So money is going to be extremely tight to the point where it makes me put a lot of questions in my mind about things. And so the last thing I can do is even afford $60 games to like try to play stuff going into the future until I can get a job. And that becomes really difficult. And and so I think, you know, when you're getting near that, like $50 was fine. And I grew up on $50 games. I didn't. We all did. Yeah. Well, I mean, but when you guys said like your experience was like an hour,
they didn't go to 60 until 2005.
Sure, no, I get you, but you guys were saying when you guys played when you guys were younger, it was like you were paying $50 for like a 1 hour experience. Here, I grew up.
Most games were $50. The only ones that were more were carts that had either like an extra RAM in them or had like an extra chip, or the game was so big that they needed to buy a bigger cart with more silicon to hold all the data.
That, but that's not my point. Is like the value of the dollar has changed in regards to amount of time you're playing usually, or the quality of the game you're getting has changed.
I mean, your entertainment per dollar for games.
For me, it's been like this throughout my entire time. For you guys, it's fluctuated extremely between the time of when you guys played games when you were younger.
I mean, I wouldn't say that, Mitch.
I wouldn't say that either. I think
they were exceptions. Those expensive games were exceptions.
The most important price shift in games in the last generation has been the move to have multiple price points, because that's the thing is the idea that you can launch indie games at like $10 or $15 or $20 now, or you can put Squadrons out at $40. You put that kind of thing, or Iron Man VR was like $40, that kind of thing. That was very unusual back in say like '99, like the PS2 era or whatever. Maybe you'd have a $10 difference here and there between like a $50 game and a $40 game, depending on like what you were buying. But the idea that you can charge less for a more boutique experience is a new thing, and I think that helps mitigate that, because even when you're looking at, you never quite knew what you were getting. Like you could get a 100-hour RPG for $50 on the the PS1 and the Dreamcast, or you could get a 10-hour survival horror game. Like it could go either way. And $50 on the Dreamcast, the Dreamcast came out, it's still $76 now. Which is more than what we'd be paying on the new price. And I just think that like at worst, the prices pretty much remain consistent in terms of the purchasing power of the dollar.
Yep. We just hit the hype train max, level 5. Thanks to everybody. Croak gave us 200 bits. Tiny2K just gave us more. Croak they're going back and forth now. You guys are awesome. Thank you guys. Every single one of those bits makes a difference for us. So
now, I think that if you want, like, tangentially from what Mitch is saying, I think you can make the argument that while the value of the dollar kind of has made the price of the high-end video games pretty consistent for the last 20, 25 years. The timing of it is the interesting element there, because yes, this doesn't really seem like the year to start asking for $10 more for your luxury entertainment product, considering what people are going through, especially in the US.
And potentially the high price we're going to pay for these consoles.
That's
the other factor.
Well, that just makes Game Pass an even more attractive thing, really, when you think about it. But like that is that ties into the whole things, like, because why? It's my whole thing about this is not going to the level designer. This is because these giant publisher corporations need to keep their bottom line up, and they need to keep that infinite growth curve happening that has come to like kind of define how kind of general capitalist expectations work in terms of retail sales and in terms of kind of the sale of luxury items and desirable things like this, especially in the entertainment world. I mean, look at how movies seem to always expect that, you made $200 million with the last one. Well, the sequel better make $250 million opening weekend kind of thing. So I think to some degree, like, one of the reasons you're seeing this happen now is that these giant publishers are feeding this unrealistic. I'm turning into Jim Sterling now. You're feeding this unrealistic expectation in the AAA space.
sounds like Square Enix with Tomb Raider. It didn't sell enough.
That's the real question.
It didn't sell enough.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the real question there is like, you're talking about the justification of the time the developers spend and the budgets they cost. But the real question is like, you're just trying to pad your stats to the shareholders and you're passing that expense on to the consumer. And if you're mad about that, I completely get it.
That's more of mine. Like, I know it's not going to go to the people that really are building the game. It's not going to raise their wage. And heck, wages haven't increased to the point to match this jump in price. So it's basically you're asking for an extra expense of the consumer and not really matching the value it was at $60 when it was back 10 years ago.
And I think if the companies do use the justification of like, well, we want to treat our employees better and have less crunch, so that's going to take more development time, which is more money, so we have to charge more money for the game. Fine, but we better see some transparency on that.
Yeah, you better show it.
You better show your work with that.
Exactly. Yep.
I guess the question I would have then is, EA was the only one to do this so far. Like, is it? And they said specifically it's because it's for the next generation one. They're building it from the ground up. Do you think?
And yet having fewer bells and whistles in it.
Yeah, which is even weirder. But do you think like someone like Sony or Microsoft may just say we're going to do $60 still? Will that change the market again to say $70 and EA will have to go back down to $60?
Well, you'd have a big advantage if you lowered your price of your game.
I don't think it would force them to lower because there have been disparities in what's priced what. Like that was certainly in play with the N64. Like, Nintendo games were usually about $60 and like third-party games tended to be 70 or 80. Part of that was to offset the cost of having to buy the cartridges from Nintendo.
Yeah.
But then for a while, a similar thing was happening where you had to license the discs from PlayStation on the PlayStation 1. You didn't even print your own disc. You had to send stuff in, and Sony made the discs for you.
Tecmo had the lock on like CD-ROM production for a long time in Japan. Yeah. They were almost like a mafia organization in the gaming industry for a long time. They somehow locked down the rights to that manufacturing, and they were shaking down the whole Japanese gaming industry.
So there's a lot of weird stuff behind that, but I would not be necessarily surprised to see Sony keep their first party stuff at 60.
I think everything's going to go 70.
But I think odds are that would be temporary. Like you would see after the first, big multi-million, just like the old price point seller. At the $70 price point, you will see everyone kind of jump up. And I also think that you'll see current gen stuff stay at 60, even if it works on the new systems.
Absolutely. Yep.
But 70 will kind of be a differentiator to tell the consumer this is a next gen product.
Yeah. So they're going to try to use that angle.
Right. They're going to try to make that make it seem more desirable.
Yeah.
A more expensive thing must be better, right? Yeah. That's the consumer perception.
It's funny, but you're right. That's exactly what's going to happen.
That's going to be the psychological trick they want to use on kind of the mainstream consumer. To us, they'll say the thing about treating developers better, but to the person in shopping at Target, they're gonna hope they see the $70 version of Madden and be like, oh, that must be way better.
Well, I think all next gen games are going to be $70. Now that they've put this out, there hasn't been an uproar. I guarantee all the publishers are like, yep, thank God, and here we go, an extra $10 for every product we sell. That's huge. I mean, think about that. How many products can you think of that when they release a new version, the price of them goes up like 30% or whatever?
And as for Microsoft, I can think of plenty of cell phones.
That's true. Yeah, any Apple cell phone for sure.
Yeah. And Blu-rays are way more expensive than DVDs were.
Yeah, I would say maybe the other thing is, it might be people are not as uproared on this too, is because there's been such a crazy tier model anyways with current gen hardware. You have the regular edition, but then you have the deluxe edition and the collector's edition. And I think over the last 5 years I've seen more options of different editions where prices go already beyond $100.
Oh, way beyond.
Way beyond.
Some of them are like $250.
Right. So it's gotten to the point where I think some people may have already been starting to buy games at $70. I'm curious
a lot of people
have,
are.
But I haven't.
Somewhere there's people listening to this in Australia that are just laughing their asses off.
Or in
prices
England,
elsewhere are crazy.
Yeah, because they've been paying 70 or 80 for games for like 5 years.
Canada pays if it goes up for them games too. That will be the big question.
I think it would be a universal hike. And I just think it's a busy year. 2020 is relentless. And I think we will see more widespread and louder opinions in line with Mitch's as the rubber starts to hit the road.
When they actually have to plunk
as you have to plunk down the pre-order for these things, like people go to buy that PlayStation 5 on Amazon, they want to buy Spider-Man for it. And maybe not Spider-Man, that might be a lower price game, but they want to buy. Let's go crazy. Let's say someone wants to buy Godfall for some reason, and they're going to say, wait a minute, why is Godfall $69.99?
Yeah,
because they're all $69.99 now, son. So that's
and they'll be like, I'm just going to keep using my PS4.
And that kind of sticker shock, I think, might be more reflected on Twitter as we move forward.
As we get closer to it.
And with the cross-gen, it might be that they just buy last gen's model and put it in their PS5.
Yeah. A lot of people are probably assuming what Mitch was assuming, that this is an anomaly, like not necessarily the rest of the industry is going to adopt it. So maybe they're not bent out of shape yet because they don't really understand the full sort of thrust of it.
I think this is definitely the tip of the iceberg. I think this is I don't want to say testing the waters because it doesn't seem like it was fully intentional, but it does. There's way too much smoke here for there to be no fire.
Yep. All right, let's move on to our last topic of episode 219. We're going to talk about probably what the biggest game release of the week. And believe it or not, it's a freaking VR game. We're going to talk about Marvel's Iron Man VR, a PlayStation VR exclusive. You cannot get this on Oculus Rift or Vive. I have not played it. I will tell my story briefly of why I didn't play it. As you guys, if you watch HQ, you know I've been cleaning out cabinets here at my home. I actually packed away my PlayStation VR. Totally didn't get the ping in my brain. It's like, wait a minute, Iron Man's coming. And then Iron Man was here, and I started thinking about having to dig it out and take everything out that I had just very meticulously placed in there. And I was like, no, because then I started thinking about motion sickness and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, Matt has played Iron Man's VR for the show. Matt, you're a big Marvel Iron Man guy. Does this do that IP justice?
More or less. I mean, there's always going to be a disappointment with any kind of Iron Man adaptation when it's not Robert Downey Jr. Because he just defines the character.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're trying in this, but it just it feels it just feels like that Simpsons where the Shelbyville version of The Simpsons, or the kind of the off-brand equivalents. Like that's what sometimes it feels like that. Like the guy doing the voice of Tony is pretty good, but he's not Downey Jr. And they're kind of Pepper is sort of like Pepper in the movies, but not. And
I think she was closer than him though. Just from watching the trailers, she seems closer at least.
It's and they're kind of trying to they're doing an original story, which.
What is the story, Matt?
So I mean, the beginning is very Iron Man origin-y, where basically you play a prologue where he is giving up his status as a weapon designer. He's early in his Iron Man career. He's just started being Iron Man, and he's decided that Stark Industries is no longer going to make weapons. So think of kind of the midpoint of the first movie.
Okay.
And as part of this, he deactivates the gunsmith, who is this AI that he uses to design the weapons. So the gunsmith is a holographic, it's a little disc, and you press the button on it and it spits out a red hologram of Tony. So gunsmith is basically Tony with the safeties off. He's even more obnoxious than Tony. He's even more he hits on everything around it. He's basically Tony as pure id, who designs all these horrible weapons and stuff. And he basically says so we're retiring you. I'm basically going to lock you up in your little AI thing, and you'll have internet access. So you'll be able to surf the web forever, but you're basically going to go to retire to a tropical island. And he's like, all right, I mean, that sounds pretty cool. Sure. And so they do that. And then it jumps 5 years later, and Tony's been Iron Man the whole time. He's a superhero. Everybody knows Iron Man. He's been doing stuff all over with the Avengers and everything, presumably. There's a lot of you see a lot of other references to Marvel characters in the environment. So presumably the entire Marvel universe is out there somewhere. And over the course of the scene that this happens, you're basically on one of his planes, and you get attacked, and you're being attacked by Stark drones that have not been manufactured for 5 years. And essentially somebody has gotten hold of his old war designs, and is attacking people with it as a means
manufactured
of revenge. As a means of revenge for all the people who died at the hands of Stark's weapons, which is very similar to the movie's plots and kind of like that whole thing about that. He was a warmonger and he's never paid for what would be his war crimes, basically. And to combat this, because the drones are upgraded with like tech they've never seen before. And so to combat this, he reactivates Gunsmith. And so sort of the story is like, Gunsmith is back and designing all these new weapons, which is how you get the upgrades for your suit. So you can upgrade the weaponry in the suit and all this stuff, which is pretty neat because you can design different loadouts, and some of it is actually meaningfully different, which I was a little surprised by. So the story is kind of like trying to stop whoever this new threat is, trying to figure out who the new threat is. And sort of balancing the idea of like becoming a weapons manufacturer again to fight fire with fire, but can you do that without corrupting yourself? And there's sort of a mystery around like who the big bad is, but it's really obvious who the big bad is.
Like from the beginning?
Oh yeah. From the very first time, it's like the big bad is sort of like reference. It's brought in reference. I was like, really? Okay. I mean, obvious. I figured, but yes. Okay, fine. So there's a couple of like little throws in, like the first villain that kind of assaults you is a known character, but I don't know if it's really her. And it's that kind of thing. The real draw is flying around as Iron Man in VR. Like the story is actually pretty heavy.
Really?
In terms of like, there's a lot of story and narration.
Does it carry you through the whole game?
No. Well, because here's the thing. Like, it's not bad. It's like kind of decent Marvel comic level story. Like if it was like a direct to DVD or direct to Disney Plus animated thing, I'd probably watch it. It's fine. The thing about it, so like the gameplay is actually pretty well. And here's the thing that in terms of you saying like digging out, I did actually have to dig out my PSVR from storage and the fucking motion, the motion controllers, whatever they're called. Move controllers. I hadn't looked at those since I moved 3 years ago. So I had to find where I put those, and then I had to charge them up for a day because they were all dead.
I bought two of those, and I have used them once. Literally, I bought them like 2 years ago just for PlayStation VR, and I used them once.
I bought them during the PS3 era because I wanted to play House of the Dead. Because you could use them for House of the Dead and like the light gun games, and I wanted to play those again. I did that for one afternoon and never did it again. But
I realized yesterday I've probably played my PlayStation VR for a grand total of probably around 50 hours.
I think you might have more hours than that than I do.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was terrible, Matt. I was like, I
think it is terrible, but I'm saying you're probably still ahead of me.
Wow. Well, you do have other.
I did the Vive, but I also haven't used the Vive in 3 years since I moved. So good money choice there. Here's the thing, like, and I thought about this while I was hooking the whole thing up and plugging all the wires in and charging the controllers and syncing the controller. I'm like, you know what? I'm tired of doing this for a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing, is like, this game is like fun.
And that's good for a PlayStation VR game. That's like Game of the Year material for PlayStation VR.
So the way it works is you have the motion controllers, they have the move controllers, and they basically are your hands. And so you can rotate them and you see your hands and your chest in front of you. And like you hold the triggers on them to fire the rockets. And so whichever direction you're holding your hands, that's the direction you're thrusting with the rockets. So that's how you fly. You can kind of steer yourself by looking. So you can by looking around with the headset, it's kind of like you'll affect up, down, slight left and right. And then if you want to rotate in place, you can completely turn around, but you'll get wrapped up in the cord. You can just hover,
right?
Yeah, you can hover, but you get wrapped up in the cord doing that. So there is an auto turn with the top buttons on the thing.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Okay, I was going to ask about that because there's a shutter, there's like a shutter moment when you look to the side in the B-roll, and I was wondering if there's a button you're pressing that changes the angle of the view.
Yeah, you hit the top two buttons. I don't remember which ones they are, but like you hit those on either one, and you'll turn left and right, and you can set it so either you kind of fade out and pop, like it's an instant cut kind of, or you can set it to be smooth turning. Smooth turning is more likely to cause motion sickness. But that's the one I use because I don't get motion sick. But there are moments in this game. I know they said it would be better for motion sick people, but there have been a couple moments in this game. Like if I was prone to motion sickness, I know that a couple of these things would have made me
Really? You can feel it pushing on you a little bit.
I just a little bit like, gave me a little vertigo. And
then it would crush me, dude.
Things that give me vertigo are
destroy me.
Destroy people that are susceptible to things like that.
Absolutely.
So you can do that. So you can actually fly around at will. It's not
an open world though?
No, it's like it's in big open spaces though.
Big chunks.
It's like a big area you can fly around in. So like there's the area of his mansion on the Malibu coast there. There's like a Shanghai area. It's like there's a VR course you can go on. There's a Pacific Ocean thing.
Matt, I'll say one thing. Looking at footage of this game, and I hate to say it, it looked like Superman 64.
It doesn't look that bad.
No, I don't mean like graphic quality.
Flying through the rings and stuff?
Yes.
So those are the flight courses. Those are like the training courses. One of the problems I have with the game is they make you do that too much. When you're in like the combat stuff,
a lot in the trailers and stuff. I was like,
that's the early stuff, and they're probably not trying to spoil things. But like when you're flying around and like doing the actual combat missions, it's very Iron Man. So like to shoot the repulsors, you hold the thing up so it holds your palm out.
That's why I whispered.
And you hit the the top button and it shoots that. And then like you have special weapons that are in the wrists. So to use that, you hold it down, so you're pointing the wrist up, and then that'll activate that, and you lock on with that. And it all feels pretty good.
It feels good, right? I mean, most people have said it. It feels like you're Iron Man.
It feels like Iron Man. They nailed it. Now, but here's the problem, and I haven't said this in a very long time. The load times kill this game dead.
Wow! Like kill it dead.
It is astounding.
Wow!
Like 2-3 minute load times. And that's just
2 or 3 minutes.
And that's just the bar. So like, imagine this. So between missions or chapters or missions, whatever you want to do, you have to sit there and look at the load screen and watch the thing slowly fill up. So for like 2 minutes, felt like 2.5 minutes, maybe some of the bigger levels. And then almost inevitably it cuts to like a black screen with a kind of falling dust. And Tony is like narrating something that is like some kind of like, it's supposed to be some kind of like introspective thing, but you're really like, you can tell it's stalling for more load time because they just loaded a meaningless screen with audio. And then you'll hear the suit sort of booting up before it even cuts to anything. And then finally it'll cut in and it still does the load in with like the HUD popping up and everything. Yeah. And I'm like, this is all covering load time. It's like, and I don't know why it's taking so long to load this thing.
Why? It's not even an open world game.
Yeah, it really isn't.
Crazy.
And there's things where so at the first big mission, there's a prologue where they familiarize you with the controls out by the Malibu mansion. But then like the first real mission is you're trying you end up jumping out of the plane and you have to save the plane and shoot some drones and stuff. But as you jump out, you're just Tony. You don't have the armor on, and you have to like catch up to the armor, and like the armor like jumps on, like in the movies, it jumps on your wrist and then it jumps on your feet, and the last thing to hit you is the helmet. So like you're suiting up, it's like bang, 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 bang. The music's going hit big. You're about to finally be able to fly.
Like, yeah, Iron Man.
The fucking helmet hits you in the face. Black load screen for like a minute. like the momentum's just gone, gone. And and that happens like so. Like the bits I'm talking about where you're playing as Tony, where you're just sort of like in his mansion talking to the characters or like upgrading. They're like that stuff stops everything dead. And like it's been criticized a lot in the reviews I saw. And I'm like, you know what? I don't like those parts either, but the reason I don't like them is because it took me 2 minutes to load in and out of them. And if they were more instantaneous, I would not, because like, I don't usually mind load times. Like if a load screen comes up, I look at my phone, I do something up, but I got a VR headset on. All I can do is look at the fucking black screen.
Somebody in chat just said there should never be blank screens in VR games.
Absolutely. Like it's because like you have to keep the experience going.
Yeah.
And like I'm sitting in here, I got contacts in, I can only wear those for so long. It's hot. Like I got this thing. In VR, never give me time to think about what I'm doing. Like, never give me time to sit there and think about what I look like. That's like, you know,
or how bad my head is sweating.
Right, exactly. And like, there's points.
That's what PlayStation VR does to me, man. It makes me sweat like crazy.
Yeah, it's very warm in there, and it just gets kind of uncomfortable when I get tired. And there's no, I mean, they say you can play this sitting down, but I don't know how you do that and kind of not ruin the illusion. So I do play it standing. And after a while, like my limit on this was about 2 hours.
That's not bad, actually.
And I got through about it takes about an hour for a chapter, I would say. And a lot of that, unfortunately, is like, I'll probably say about 10 minutes of that is load time.
Wow.
But like,
10%?
On the chapter.
That's more than 10%. That's like 20%.
But like, It's more like 7, but it's a chunk, and it feels like I haven't done much because
the fact you even had to quantify it just shows you how bad it is. Holy cow!
So it is pretty substantial. It's 12 chapters plus the prologue. How
long is it?
It's 12 chapters plus the prologue.
You said an hour each one.
So I'd say it's about 12 hours long.
Wow. That's maybe the longest VR game I've ever heard of.
It's up there. And, so you're doing so. And it does feel good when you're in there playing. And to their credit, once you're in the chapter, it does last a while. Like, it's not like you're going in for a 5-minute gameplay session and then you gotta wait a minute and a half for the load out. It does, like, the chapters do take a while. You fly all over the place. You do a bunch of different things. And the combat's fun, like locking onto stuff and firing things off is cool. Like, and eventually you kind of get into this rhythm of like, you got to fly, but you also got to shoot. So you learn to sort of like, you double tap the triggers, you boost. So like, you kind of get to learn like, oh, if you're just trying to fly normally, you're probably going to get hit by stuff. So you got to like boost out of the way and then hold your hand out and shoot them with the repulsors. And after a while, like once you get all that down, you're like, yeah, I'm fucking Iron Man.
Yeah,
like, it's
great. It sounds like it.
But I will say that, and like it looks pretty good. It looks okay. Like visually, it looks pretty good. And I will say this: I discovered a trick that I didn't know about. And I wish I'd known about sooner with the settings of the VR device. Where if you go, so I don't know, probably everybody knew this, but me, I don't know.
I don't know it.
If you go into settings and you go to devices and you pick the PlayStation VR, there'll be a setting in there for eye width, setting eye width. And you go in and it's like default, like 67 millimeters, I think, or something like that. And you go in and like you're supposed to go up to the PlayStation camera and it takes a picture of you. And then you use like a crosshairs to point out the exact center of your eyeballs on each camera. And then it's like, and I'm telling you, like, because I played the first session like that, and then I was annoyed about how I've always been annoyed by how kind of blurry a lot of the PlayStation VR stuff is.
Yeah,
I just started.
It's a big problem.
Like maybe there's something I can do to like make it like sharper, or like turn off blur, or do something. I don't know. And I found this thing, and I did. I swear to God, it's like twice as sharp as it was when I played it before. It changed. It only was like 2 millimeters difference on my when I set my eye thing. But I swear it made all of a sudden I could see all the details around in Tony's lad.
Wow!
It made a big difference. So if you haven't done that and you play as PlayStation VR, and I also played replayed the Battlefront Rogue One VR X-Wing mission, and it looked way better than I remembered it looking. Because so apparently that's a big deal, and they should probably freaking tell you about it when you first plug the PSVR in. But here we go. So basically, I guess what I'm saying is like I like the game when I play it, but it feels very disjointed and chore-like because of how often the load times just interrupt everything and make me think about other things I could or should.
And the setup, having to stand up while you play
all that stuff.
It's a thing. It's not a casual game that you just sit down and play.
No, it's just that thing where it's like when this tech gets to the point that you can just pick the headset off the table and just go, boom, here we go. It'll be great. But until then, it's really, really hard to kind of like really fully get into it. Even in the way that I did with like Vive stuff. Like Vive stuff I felt was easier. Also because with the Vive, I can because the room scale thing works the way it does, I can position the cords from the headset behind me. So I can face like with my back to the PC basically. Mm-hmm. And with the PSVR, because the PlayStation's over here and the camera's facing me like this, the cord has to be sort of coming under my arm or over my shoulder to the entertainment center. Yep. And it's much more in the way. So that's a downside too.
But I will say it's $40 or $50?
$40.
$40.
I want to say it's $40.
That's a pretty good deal.
It's not. I mean, if you can put up with the load times and the kind of the foibles of the PSVR, it is a good time, and it is here's the thing. I just play this as a normal Iron Man game. If you want to just make like a nice open world, play as Iron Man and shoot stuff game, I'd like to play that probably more than I'd like to play this. But I will say this, assuming PSVR works properly with PS5, and it seems like it will. It seems like you can use it for that.
Yes.
Who knows what functionality will be there at launch, but whatever. I would be interested to try playing this again on PS5 if it cuts the load times down the way it does with like the Spider-Man game.
And you played on Pro, just to clarify.
This is
so people know that the loading times you're speaking of, that's not because you have an old launch PlayStation 4.
No, you have a Pro. And I mean, multiple times I just would stare at that load arc reactor and just be like, how is this taking this long?
Well, you're trapped in the freaking helmet the whole time. You can't see anything.
But I mean, even by the standards of load times today, it's taking forever. And I'm just like, in the year of our Lord 2020, people, I don't get it. Especially for like, I mean, I know that VR, you're rendering things twice. It's not that, doesn't seem that other games don't seem to take that long to load in PSVR. So I don't know what's happening there. But I will say it runs pretty smooth. At least
very
on the Pro.
Important for VR game.
It runs pretty smooth. Like the targeting's good. I never like lost things from choppiness or anything. Like it's, once you're playing it, it's real good. But like
all the stuff in between,
everything in between is a chore.
Yeah.
And even little things like, upgrading the suit, you point at the thing and it opens everything up and you get to see all this stuff and, there's tons of different.
That's awesome.
You have to spin the globe and pick your next mission on this giant globe of Earth, and like the enemy encyclopedia. Like you go to this table and there's pictures of them. You reach into the table and pick the thing out of the photograph and like hold it up as like a 3D model, and it's like tells you about it and stuff. Like there's a lot of cool little gimmicks in there in the kind of the between mission like home base stuff, but like. Not for 5 minutes of total load time. It's like you just got to get on with it.
Yeah. So this is probably the penultimate feather in PlayStation VR's cap. Do you recommend that the 2 million people who own PlayStation VR pick this up?
I mean, if you desperately want to use the thing again, if you haven't already put it in a box somewhere, sure.
The next week or so is pretty slow for game releases too, so that might be worth considering until.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you get from my description sort of the downsides, and if you're willing to put up with that for VR, if you're more patient about the downsides of VR than I am, and you can put up with the load times, sure. The other thing I'd say is like if you hate load times in VR and I understand that, I'm right there with you. I do think this might be worth revisiting on the PS5. If they can because I assume that this will be supported by the PS5 in terms of like optimization, because they did just put it out. Clearly it's part of the deal where they have to run on PS5 after July or whatever. And I would imagine because this is a PlayStation VR exclusive or PlayStation exclusive, they might remember that, hey, we should probably make this run well. And so if they can do a similar thing and cut the load times by half, not even eliminate them. Yeah. Like it would be a totally different experience for me.
I mean, it may eliminate them with the SSD.
It might. So. The only question becomes, are you willing to donate that much SSD space to Iron Man VR?
Yeah, good point.
But I do enjoy the moment-to-moment stuff, and I would be willing to try it again, because I don't know if I'm going to get all the way through it. It is a lot.
How far are you right now?
I'm at the beginning of chapter 5, so I'm like closing in on halfway, presumably.
Yep.
But the stories aren't really pulling me through, and the load times. And
someone was asking that in chat. Actually, does the story pull you through the game?
Not really. I mean, it's so predictable in terms of like who's behind it and wwhat's going on that you're just sort of like at this point, I'm kind of insulted that the game doesn't seem to think I figured it out. And I'm like, come on, bro. Like, so, because clearly they're building to a big reveal near the end because of some of the things that are in place for it. And they're like, okay, well, you set some of these things up so that you can't break that before the end of the game because of how like the flow works. So I know this is going to end up being like it's going to end up being like the big, oh my God, this. And I'm going to be like, yeah, I knew that in chapter 2, dude.
Well, Matt, let me ask you out of curiosity, because I know you're a big comic book Marvel. You know everything about those kinds of things. Is it because you already know about the comics and stuff, or is the story just that blatantly?
No, this is a new story. This is a brand new story.
Okay.
This is not an adaptation of any story from the comics or anything outside of kind of the usual trope of Tony wants to stop making weapons.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's Iron Man VR. I'm not going to try it, but you might want to. You did a good job discussing it, though, Matt. I think you gave a good overview, and I think you managed to touch on the different types of players who might be into it, which is really important, especially with a niche thing like VR. So good job, brother. It's time to go to our Q&A. And as you guys know, and some people are already on it. As soon as you hear the tone of my voice shift, there go the questions. But anyway, this is your chance to get questions into the chat. Go at Sifted Games, and while you're getting those in, we'll listen to a word from our sponsor.
Ready to get away from it all without losing all the comforts of home? DeShazer Ryan Realty has a once-in-a-lifetime 200-acre estate for sale in Libby, Montana that gives new meaning to the phrase roughing it. This eye-popping main lake house on this sprawling estate has 4 bedrooms and bathrooms, phone, and internet. There are also separate guest and caretaker houses. It's the first time this property has ever been for sale, so don't let the chance to buy a slice of outdoor heaven pass by. It can be yours for $3.4 million. If you're interested, no matter where you live, contact Doug DeShazer at 406-291-1643 or deshazermt@gmail.com. He can also connect you with local realtors who can help you with your specific needs. If you want to see more, head on over to www.snowshoeranchmt.com. That's snowshoeranchmt.com.
You know, like after talking all this games, this is really relaxing to watch. It's like therapy.
I made that ad. I had a lot of fun. If you listen really closely, there's like birds chirping in the background.
Sounds. That's why I was like, it's so meditating. It's great.
Yeah, you hear us yell about video games for 3 hours, and we play a little ASMR, and then we're going to take some questions.
Yes. Anyway, like I said earlier, hit up Doug, man. He's a really good dude, and he will take care of you. Let's get to some questions. There were a bunch that were in here that were pretty good before we even asked for them. I want to make sure that I get to those if I can. Here's one from a bunch of jerks. Another great username. Any thoughts on the online Evo cancellation and other allegations against numerous pro players in the competitive Smash Brothers scene? I knew this was coming. Mm-hmm. I probably should have rolled this into our other discussion, but I did not. I think really, I just didn't want this whole episode to be gloom and doom. I got to a certain point and I was like, we can't talk about bad stuff the whole damn time. But yeah, again, just awful stories coming out of Evo. Evo's been canceled, the world's biggest fighting tournament canceled because the CEO was a total scumbag. He has been replaced, by the way. He was replaced immediately by someone who I believe should probably do a pretty good job. But Matt, what's your take on this? You've been pretty close to Evo through the years. Mm-hmm. Does this surprise you all that much? Because I'll admit that it doesn't surprise me that much, sadly.
Not at all.
Yeah.
In fact, this is one of the things that when the Smash world sort of collided with the fighting game community, this is one of the things the fighting game community was worried about.
Because it's a much younger audience.
It's a different world. It doesn't come out of the arcades like the rest of the fighting game world does. It was just oil and water to a large degree.
Now you're really seeing it.
Now you're really seeing it. It's just the sheer amount of people being outed is just amazing. Like,
the crazy part about it too is that like a lot of them are females. Like when you hear stories about this, you always assume it's a male. Mm-hmm. Several were female players who were preying on younger players.
Predators come in all shapes.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter, but typically it does seem to be that it's usually dudes, but not in this case. It was an equal opportunity offense, man. It's
so awesome. I mean, yeah, I think obviously Evo Online is gone. Capcom and NetherRealm and other companies pulled way the fuck out.
Will they ever get any sponsors back? Who's going to be the first sponsor to be like, I sponsored Evo after a bunch of kids?
Here's the thing. I mean, my solution to this, and nobody wants to hear it or they won't do it. I don't know, but they got rid of Mr. Wizard, who was the co-founder, who was
creepy. Obviously.
Yeah. Allegedly, I guess. But it seems to be becoming kind of an open secret in the Smash community. And along with a lot of these other things.
Yeah.
So my suggestion, it's not like the fighting game side of things is squeaky clean either. Let's be honest. There's a lot of problems over there. Not to this degree, as far as I can recall. So if you're assuming next year we can have in-person events again, which is an assumption still. Let's say that by next July, please, we can have in-person fighting game tournaments again. You're going to do Evo again. I would say no more.
Does it happen next year?
Next year, I would try to. If you don't get it resurrected next year, I think Evo's gone forever.
It's so dicey.
You bring it
back. I almost feel like you wait a year, though.
No, that is a year.
I mean, you let a year go without it.
We are going to let a year happen without it. And
I think there's going to be. Could a rename, rebrand, change it?
No,
they could, but it would care then.
No, because Evo is Evo, and here's the other thing.
There are fighting tournaments all over the world. That
there's nothing inherent about the Evo brand that causes this or endorses this. It didn't, it's not like this came out because it was happening at Evo as Evo happened. And obviously, there were things that happened during previous Evos, but I think what you can do is, first off, no more Smash Brothers at Evo. Yeah. That's the end of it. They
don't want to do that though, because it's one of the most viewed.
It is one of the most viewed, but it's also apparently one of the most other things. So no more Smash Brothers.
I agree.
Get that shit out. Get that whole community removed from the brand.
First of all, look, there's a lot of blame to go around here. The kids' parents who are allowing these kids to go to Las freaking Vegas and just go hang out with some random dudes at a fighting game tournament. That's not a good idea, man. You should be there as a chaperone in Las Vegas with your preteen.
Yeah, that's not how I would have done it. But it also veers a little, also these people should not have been doing that to preteens in the first place.
Absolutely. Obviously. I totally get that. But
and of course, that's kind of the thing about abusers and predators in that regard, is they are going to work very hard to make it seem like these kids are safe with them, because otherwise that's
you're right.
Opportunities.
That's what they do. It's called grooming, right?
Yeah. And so I would say basically removing, maybe not forever. There might be other ways to integrate Smash back into that. But right now that's toxic. You get that out of there. You say hey, Capcom, NetherRealm, can you come back? We don't have those people here anymore. Our CEO has been replaced. And of course, it's been replaced by Tony Cannon, one of the Cannon brothers, who was also one of the co-founders. They're on the up and up. And hopefully you can kind of say, have it be kind of a comeback and sort of do your best to cut that side of things out. It would be,
sponsor is going to be tough.
Sponsor is going to be tough, but also look, man, Evo existed for a very long time with no Smash Brothers in it.
It also existed for a very long time being anonymous with very few sponsors. So
but that's true of everything.
Right. But they may have to just kind of go back to that grassroots thing.
But the sponsors aren't nearly as important as getting Capcom back online, getting NetherRealm, because
they're also sponsors.
Right. But the problem with Capcom pulling out is you can't use Street Fighter anymore. Right. Yeah. It's much more important to get the game companies allowing you to use their games rather than getting Madcast doesn't exist anymore. But getting controller companies.
I know what you mean.
Or whatever. But you got maybe Red Bull won't be back next year, or whoever's their energy drink Monster. I don't know. I remember who was the sponsor.
Their best bet, honestly, is to get some of the Japanese publishers back. Let's just be honest. Their culture is a little different there, and they look at things a little bit differently. And if they're going to get a sponsor back, it's probably going to be a Japanese sponsor first.
I think Capcom will come back. These guys, the Cannon brothers have a lot of, Tony Cannon has plenty of good relationships with Capcom. They've been working with them forever. And if they can show, and this would be an internal thing, this would not be something you just do publicly. It'd be something you'd have to show them in meetings and whatever, that you have addressed this problem and you have a way to guarantee that this is not going to be a thing going forward. And again, I think the easiest way to do that is just to tell them Smash Brothers will not be there again.
Yep.
And that's not very fair to the Smash fans who didn't do anything wrong. It sucks that you have to remove Smash Brothers from what was maybe will be again, I don't know, the most prestigious fighting game tournament in the world.
It still is,
but even if it never happens again, there's no replacement yet.
Yeah.
Something may rise to replace it, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
It sucks that everyone has to be punished for that, but that's the nature of the
maybe
beast.
Everyone needed to get their house in order. Let's be honest. There probably needed to be better protocols to keep the underage kids away from the adults and blah, blah, blah. So sometimes you got to learn lessons the hard way.
And my other thing is what's Nintendo's response to this? If Nintendo made a statement about any of this, I have not seen it.
It did make a statement.
Did they?
Yeah, it took a few days before it did, but it did make a statement. It condemned it, blah, blah, blah. But yeah. They didn't go into much more detail about it, though.
But I think
of course.
I think you can do it.
Nintendo wants to talk about.
I think you can do it. You just have to quarantine the community that brought that into the scene, and you sort of try to go back to basics with it as best you can. Maybe you can't do it in Mandalay Bay this time. Maybe like you said, maybe you scale it back to what he was in 2008, 2009, and see how it goes.
Yep. Damboy90, thank you for Twitch Prime. Sorry if I missed some of you guys earlier in the episode. I'm sure I did. Croak, thank you. Signtyke, thank you for the emotes. Eric Scott, thank you for Twitch Prime. All you guys are freaking awesome. We'll answer a couple more here before we go. From Commander Fett 03, what do you think Lucasfilm will do with the Star Wars license once its contract with EA is up in the next couple years? I think they'll re-sign.
I think they're going. Well, I think it depends how EA's trajectory on this goes over the next year or two.
Let's see. I think the trajectory is starting to point up.
It is, but we'll see how they do. I think they may not. I think they might keep relations with EA for certain franchises, but I think, and I've heard rumblings that they are organizing to do this internally, that they will not have an exclusive contract with anyone.
No way. So they're going to a la carte their IP?
My guess would be that they would, not that they'd cut EA out of it. Like EA would, EA still makes Fallen Order
or something.
Well, they still make Fallen Order, or they'd still make Squadrons if that's popular. And they want the sequel to that, Battlefront, etc. But I think they would kind of choose what projects they want to do, or take pitches from other developers or other publishers and say, like LucasArts used to do. Like they would just go, if they didn't do it internally, they would go find a developer that they thought was appropriate for it. And like with Pandemic making the original Battlefront and stuff like that, I think that will be the model they go to, because I think even if EA does turn it around, and it looks like they are sort of turning it around here, I think that this exclusive contract has shown that putting all your eggs in one publisher basket for this license is a mistake.
I think just in general, in life in general, putting your eggs in one basket is almost never a good idea. Anything you think of, putting all your eggs in one basket is almost always a mistake.
But stay away from it. But we got 3 years before that happens. So
that's true.
We'll see what
Plenty
happens.
Plenty of time.
EA's got some time to put out some real winners here.
Last question from Cinetyke. I can never get it right. Regarding games, what is it?
Cinetic.
Boy, I had it really wrong.
Yeah, he's like it's if I remember the origin, can't remember the origin. It's European of somewhere. Okay. And he's
Cinetic. I'll try to remember that for next week.
It's like kinetic, but Cinetic.
Okay. Regarding games going to $70 and the conversation about games being too long, do you think there's an opportunity for developers or publishers to introduce AAA or close to AAA games that are shorter, like 12 to 15 hours, but also not the full $70?
I think it brings this up because Sean Layden made that comment about wanting games to be back to 12 hours. He's like, I'll take a AAA game back to 12-hour experience. I'm not sure. I think the only thing closest that we've had an example of this would be Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. That's
I think that, or a Plague Tale.
Yeah,
sort of in the same boat.
Which both did really well. I mean, I'd be open to it.
He actually mentions both those games in his question. I just didn't read the rest of it. That's crazy. I'm like, they get the gist. Pricing games based on length, I don't know if that's something we're ever going to see.
I don't think that's going to be a thing. If I recall correctly, Plague Tale was priced lower than 60.
It was,
if I remember
40.
correctly.
Yeah.
40. Yeah. It's not out of the question, but I don't know. Layden's comments about taking games back to 12 hours is that's cute, sure, but you're people are gonna balk at that if there's no replay value, I think, or if it's not like a Game Pass thing. I think if you're charging, especially if you're gonna hike up to $70, if that thing's not doing 30-35 hours, you're questionable.
Yeah. I
include multiplayer on that. Halo's campaign is 10 hours long, but multiplayer theoretically lasts forever. Sure. Great. But if you're going to make a Fallen Order, it better be substantial.
Yeah. One thing I do like about the price hike is that it makes shows like GameFace more important, because you have to make tougher decisions with your money. It's not $60 now, it's $70. That's an extra $10. So it helps us out as far as people wanting to get information before they plunk their money down. That's just going to become all the more important when the price goes up. Okay, that's it for GameFace 219. Before I go, Justin Horman, thank you for your Twitch Prime subscription. I missed you earlier. I want to make sure I mention that because you're a great patron. Sorry to anyone whose questions we didn't get to. I do see a bunch down there at the bottom. The Esh84, thank you for Twitch Prime. That's freaking amazing. As I said, I'm Shane Satterfield. You can find me on Twitter at Dinfire. You can find Matt at MKyle. And you can find Mitch at Mitch Sikor, Sikor. And if you want to find Sifted on Twitter, and honestly, I hate to say it, but it's probably, for most of you, the most important account to follow, especially those of you who aren't patrons or subscribers. If you want to know when all our stuff is going up on YouTube so you can watch it without having to pay, you got to follow us on Twitter. We announce all that stuff there the exact minute that it goes up. If you're listening to the show out in internet land on any of the 5 or 6 services that GameFace is on, and you enjoy the show, it would be great if you could help us out with a couple bucks a month at our Patreon. That's at patreon.com/sifted. And we appreciate every dollar. So with that, on behalf of Matt and Mitch, I'm Shane. We'll see you next Tuesday. GameFace is up and out.